Hi, this is Logan with Spiritual Danger Close Podcast. Normally, episodes are the narration of my blogs, which come from my thoughts on a particular subject. And learning of what it means to live spiritual danger close requires to have an open conversation with knowledgeable individuals. Today's episode reflects that idea and hopefully helps you with your spiritual discipline. Today's speaker was requested by me or those who follow the blog or podcast. If there's a conversation you'd like to hear or wanted to comment on today's episode, please do so. I hope you enjoy the conversation that you're about to listen to. Pardon me as we take a short break from this episode. Feel free to freshen up and get a snack and a drink. In the meantime, here's a short ad from one of the show's sponsors. Many parents are seeing the benefits to homeschooling. Maybe you've thought about it but don't know where to start. Maybe you did start but are having doubts. Or maybe you're experienced but want to improve as a home educator. Homeschool Advantage offers comprehensive training to address these questions and many more. From free resources to parent courses and much more, you can go to homeschooladvantage.com. That's homeschooladvantage.com. Good afternoon, Leiland. How's it going?
It's going great. It's Saturday and excited to talk things that I like.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I appreciate you making time, basically going straight from work to this. It's really awesome. And I am currently at 6:19 a.m. my time Sunday. So I am currently wearing a suit, ready to rock and roll immediately into heading to church, because I know this is going to be a long conversation. So I really appreciate your time and give thanks to the spouse for letting you do this as well. So
yeah, she's appreciative to have a day to herself to read and relax. So I think it's okay. It's a win-win.
Awesome. But for those who don't know, you are a Latter-day bard. Jokingly, a bard is a character from the Dungeons and Dragons whose job in the group is to uplift others and encourage them onward into battle, typically through music or poetry or reading or whatever way you want to do it. But you're doing a little bit differently by making non-cringe Latter-day music.
I hope it's non-cringe. I know I get called non-cringe, and it's usually the anti-Mormons who throw sideways compliments at me while saying it's cringe. Like, well, but the flow was nice, but it's still cringe.
Flow is nice, yeah.
Yeah.
I've actually seen you on Exmo Reddit, so I mean, you are, I would say, quite famous throughout the community. So,
yeah, not the right parts of the community. It would seem that's hard to penetrate.
Yeah.
To be taken seriously, I think by the more stringent traditional members, will say.
I've seen some comments saying that if they had found you, it'd probably been easier for them to stay. You have a very large discography, as I discussed. You have 123 tracks right now, and currently working on some other stuff. I don't want to kind of get into that, but I am in a Discord with you and a couple other Latter-day artists, and everyone's doing stuff, and I love it. How did you get into, before I go there, for those who know my blog, I did ask some of these questions, so I'm not going to really go into those details moving forward. For those who don't really know you, how did you get into making music and doing this path of tweets? And
yeah, well, okay, well, the tweets parts, that's much later. That's
much later.
Recent
Okay.
history, right? Let's go back to ancient history. I was born into a very artistic family, we'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
My mom's a fine artist, and my dad's an accomplished musician as well. But I grew up in a house where it was like art snobbery. I mean, we couldn't watch a movie without having everybody in the family critique it, and have their opinion and take on accents or how things were presented or whatever it is. So it was constant creative flux is what I'll call it, where everybody in the family had different talents. Not everybody was great at music like my dad. Not everybody was awesome at drawing or painting like my mom. but everybody had something, and it was almost like a competition among siblings, among family members in terms of who could be funnier, who could make everyone laugh the most, you know, who could be more outrageous, who could act better, that kind of thing. So growing up in an atmosphere like that, I've just naturally been creative, been inventive, imaginative, used my imagination. Also, I grew up in Central Phoenix, very poor. My dad struggled to keep a full-time job, and also had a lot of trials himself. So, I mean, I guess we'll talk about it this way. And I don't think he'll be mad even if he hears it, and who knows if he'll listen or not. But my family was not the ideal Latter-day Saint family, though we looked it on the outside. And I think that's a big issue and problem that, I mean, we could spend a whole episode talking about that in terms of the hypocrisy or the two-faced nature of like superficial membership in the church, where it's more of a social construct and something you keep up as like an outer barrier to show people that, you know, or to be in the network, but behind closed doors, maybe things are abusive, emotionally, physically, whatever it might be. My house was that case where, and I look at it like this, like we just recently read in Come Follow Me all about David, and how blessed he was of the Lord in terms of spirituality, his leadership, what he was able to accomplish, his zeal, his passion, his talents. I mean, he was a poet and a writer and a musician himself in his own right, David was. But unto those who have great talents given or opportunities presented, there are also, I think, equal opportunities to struggle, to be tempted, to prove those talents against weaknesses. And that's the dichotomy of wanting to go big and have big talents, is that you're faced with big temptations, and sometimes they're hard to resist. So for my dad, I know, who was very talented, a lot of temptations growing up, and I mean, he failed hard, and our family is broken because of it. Even today, me and my older sister are the only active siblings at the moment. My parents divorced after I came back from my mission, and a lot of families in my stake that I grew up in actually turned out kind of the same way, where it seemed like growing up, everybody was putting on the face of a faithful membership and doing what they could to get along. And don't get me wrong, there were major spiritual moments where the Lord was with us and miracles were performed. My dad gave blessings to me even where I was healed. So it wasn't that we were abandoned, but the environment growing up was definitely one that was full of energy, both positive and negative. And I say all this and share all this to kind of build the substrate that my talents have grown out of, that I've been under a lot of pressure in my life to appease maybe my parents or my dad or my mom, who were angry or fighting with each other or whatever it is. And so that condition, right, an abusive family, growing up in something like that where you're under constant stress as a kid, I developed some interesting tactics, some talents. One was to kind of build a bubble and go within and become very imaginative, where I could just get lost in my own world and tune out things that were going on outside that might, you know, be scary or cause fear in young kids. And these talents carried with me throughout my life. I eventually ended up going into high school, and that was kind of my first introduction to rap music and that kind of culture. My dad, being a guitarist and in bands and things, played a lot of heavy metal, hair band, 80s stuff, Satriani, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath. These are the bands I grew up on. And rap music was like illegal in our house. And country music and rap music were illegal in our house. You weren't allowed to play that. That was trash music, zero artistic quality to it. So that's kind of the attitude I grew up in. And then going to high school, where it was just always present. I grew up in Central Phoenix, like I said, and went to an inner city school that I was the minority, you know, white kids and a member of the church. There were only a handful of us. We had to even go to seminary in a building across the street, like a house that the stake rented. And so everybody would see us walking back and forth to church and make fun of us. But we stuck together, and we kind of had to confront the rap, had to confront the culture around us, the Babylon around us, right? It was there, and either I could just diss it and you know, snuff my nose at it forever and take the path of even my family and my dad. They approved of that, or to me it became a challenge, because I think we talked about this in what we wrote about, but I kind of want to tell it again, in that there were freestyle battles during lunch period in high school. And the local radio station would come and sponsor these. They'd come in with a big truck and set up their set, hand out stuff, and blast the instrumental beats, and then invite people to come on and freestyle battle for prizes. And it was cringe. I mean, these big 6'5" black guys on my football team were getting up there and just embarrassing themselves, but they were winning and everybody was into it. And it made everybody at the school, like, you could see that they connected with it. There was something there. And so for me to just dismiss that wholeheartedly and have to live in that environment and be in that environment every day, that's more emotionally exhausting than it was for me to say to myself, I could do that, right? I get A pluses. I'm in the honors program. I'm in the top percentage of everybody at the school in terms of intelligence. Like, I know how to rhyme. I could get up there and make rhymes and make that are coherent and make fun of someone for money. Like, why don't I just go try? And so I kind of set it up as a bet with my friends, and they said I wouldn't, and I did. And I ended up winning. Like, it was easy. I discovered that I had a knack for it. Back up a little bit. It's not just that it came out of the blue, because I started playing instruments at a young age, being in a musical family and stuff. I was messing around on our family piano. I took piano lessons. I played some, I could read music. I took band in middle school, and I played clarinet, actually, was the first instrument I played. And when I realized that was kind of gay, to be honest, I moved into high school into jazz band as a freshman and switched to the alto saxophone. And that was more my speed. The jazz music was something I really connected with in terms of feeling the rhythm, being driven by the rhythm, and then given the liberty as a saxophonist or a soloist, period, in a jazz squad, to riff, to have improvisational solos, like on the spot. To me, that was like, it was candy. It was what drew me to music at that point moving forward, was this ability to be creative over something with a group behind you and to be coherent and in harmony and move based on what your emotions are dictating. I was the only freshman in my class to make jazz A, which is like the top A, and I was given solos in our jazz team. So I had a natural ability for it. And I owe a lot of that to my dad, who played electric guitar and was, I mean, to me, he's a god on the guitar. Like, he's the best guitar player I know. But a lot of flaws and challenges in life. He's not the guy that's on the cover of all the CDs that everybody knows, although he could play just as well as them. Like, that's my dad. And so having that kind of model, knowing in my mind, like, I'll never be as good as my dad playing guitar, was kind of how I grew up. But also, with that mindset, you learn to admire their qualities and almost idolize them. And his ability to play like freestyle guitar and just make songs that would go on for an hour at night, and I would fall asleep to that, like his electric guitar playing just riffs. Just it was probably a number of songs, like a remix, but he was just playing them as if it was one song. And to me, that was appealing, and that's kind of what I drew out, I think, in my jazz band experience in solos. And that translated to the rap. That's really that's what I'm getting at. I mean, it's a long-winded story. Nobody wants to know about my high school jazz band career, but that's what I can see being the major impetus behind why I had so much ability when I just transferred those things I was doing with a musical instrument to what I was doing with my mind and my mouth as an instrument. And when I saw rap as that, and not so much as this culture thing that I had to be a part of, otherwise I couldn't do it. You can't dare be a white rapper and not, pretend that you're Eminem, or pretend that because Eminem was big at the time. Everybody wanted to call me that. Oh, you're the next Eminem. It's like, no, I don't want to be Eminem. I like the rap, and I listened to Eminem. I had to. It was the only stuff I had. I listened to a lot of Tupac. Those are probably my two like biggest Gentile rap influences that I tried to emulate early, to learn and make fun of and have fun with rap, is what it started as. And then my taste evolved, and now I'm going kind of off the rails. But to your initial question, like, how did I get involved in all this? It started as a joke at lunch in high school to win movie tickets, and I did, and I won them like repeatedly, and I became kind of this icon at the school, that I got invited to parties even on the South Side with all the other football teams that were really ghetto, and they would have me come. My friends would find me in party houses surrounded by just like a mob of football teams. And there I was in the middle of them, just like bagging on them. And my friends thought I was going to get killed, but they loved it. They loved what I was doing. They loved that I was engaged in it and that I was real about it and that I had talent for it. And I could play with them, and I was good at it. So that gave me a lot of confidence to have those kind of experiences young, to see that my music could affect a room like that, and I could be the life of a party just by saying nonsense that came to my mind and rapped and rhymed. Like that to me was like, this is easy. And then I started to record stuff just as a joke, because I actually didn't like rap music. I used to make fun of it because my parents did and everybody did. And so I would make parodies, and I would start to record them. But as I started to do that, it became something more. And hold on, I think I gotta let my dog in real quick. But I don't know if that answers the question, at least in terms of how I got started. From there, it's taken a whole new trajectory in terms of, I started taking it seriously, because recording and finding out, wow, people really responded well to this that I put together in one night just on a whim, thinking it was a joke, and they're like, wow, this is really good. That continued to push me to get better at the craft. And I mean, it's been ever since I was 15, essentially, and I'm 37 this year. I'll be. That's every day, every week, every something. I've been working, or had this in mind, that I'm a poet, that I write poetry, and I have a huge catalog of it that someday when I die will be released, and it will dwarf the 123 tracks that you see out there now. And all those I just consider kind of practice, to be honest. I feel like I'm just getting started, is what it
Just
feels
getting
like to me.
started.
Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question in terms of how I got started into this, how it got steamrolled. But I come from a very talented family and have talents that I recognize, and I have been aware that I have talents and working on them actively. So it's not a cocky thing either. I mean, it is when I'm freestyling people and you're telling them you're the best rapper alive or whatever. Like it can be the appearance of cocky, but it's the least in my mind. Like when I'm writing raps, I'm humbled. I am doing it in prayer. I get on my knees and I ask Heavenly Father, like, bless me with inspiration to understand, to connect with somebody, to spread a message that changes someone's life. That's what I realized this stuff has the power to do, because the ghetto rap music I was listening to, Tupac was changing my life, right? And he was rapping about garbage, to be honest. I mean, some good social issues and awareness things, but it's all Gentile. It's not eternal. And that's what I really resonated with, was combining that technique of poetry, right? And that's what I consider rap as, a technique of delivering a message. Combining that with eternal principles, to me, resonates. And I can't stop thinking about it. That's why I write these songs. And then in my mind, one word or symbol or idea or line or similar phrasing to something I've written just awakens a rush of memories that I've associated now with these poems, with this art, with this part of my heart that I've been able to express in a way. So it's a defensive mechanism for me to stay out of Babylon, to be focused on the rap as a craft and my own craft, and not to try and fit into some rap culture. And I hate that even term. Like, if I wanted to go be popular and get heard on the radio stations, like I tried to do when I was younger, they wanted to see that you were about the culture. They didn't care about your talent, to be honest. They wanted to know if you were gonna be baptized into their religion so that they could move you around about with their laws and principles of their gospel. That's really what it was. They wanted puppets, and they weren't looking for new ideas. They weren't looking for innovative LDS rappers that probably would have made a lot of eyes, uplift and be different. If I could keep up with the other guys and keep it clean and be rapping about doctrines about like Kolob and resurrection and immortality and Jesus Christ, like it's not your typical Christian rap, and it's not real rap. It's something different, and I'm proud of that because I've just stayed true to myself and what I've been doing this whole time, and stopped caring that people are going to judge me for being a white rapper in 2022 and a member of the church. Right? Like there's several layers of initial judgment that go out with who I am that I'm already comfortable with, and I just don't care anymore. Like I understand people are going to say and believe what they want, but until they sit down and have conversations like this or listen to my music, or I can explain what I'm trying to convey in my poetry, they'll never know. They'll never know. And I'm okay with that. I understand that. And so I don't hold it against anybody for thinking I'm weird or thinking it's inappropriate or thinking that, what I'm doing is a waste of time, because they don't know. They don't know the connections that I am making, the people that I am impacting, and that are in turn impacting my life with their stories and how they've changed.
I appreciate you giving that synopsis. people end up having to do that all the time when you go on different podcasts and such. But yeah, I know, I know personally for me, I don't remember exactly how I came across your stuff, except for I knew it was with Twitter, and the algorithm made me find you, and decided why not? Let me listen. I was like, wow, where's this genre? Where's this at Deseret Book? Uh, it just it wasn't cringe. For Latter-day Saint music, the large bulk of it is soft a cappella, or it's hymn traditional takes, or it's like weird pop country stuff. And I saw some southern rock and one thing, but it was all just super it's almost like you don't want to listen to it. You just
It's
want to
bland.
get it.
It's
It's
bland to
bland.
me.
It's
Yeah.
soulless is what I would aptly describe that. And when you were telling me about how you come from this musical background and you were on the jazz, for those who don't know, Biggie Smalls was a very influential rap artist in the East Coast, who eventually was shot due to some street beef. That is a debate of why and who shot him, similar to Tupac's death. But Biggie, when he lived in New York, one of his neighbors was actually a jazz musician who taught him all these things, and he actually played instruments and played piano and knew how to build that rhythm. So I really can feel your years, several decades worth of musical talent coming forward. And it's just really easy. Like, we could probably give you the most ridiculous bars and you would find a rhythm that would match with that. And that is something interesting that you've been able to sort of like, you were born in it, but then also discovered that you could take it elsewhere. And you did so sort of counter to what your family's culture was, that, oh, we don't do rap. A lot of people are like that, but oh, in this house we don't listen to country. That's
Right.
insert, inappropriate word, but it's very interesting that's how you got into it, and you've just kind of did that. And from what it sounds like, it wasn't just like one thing that hit, like, oh, I could do this. It was almost like you just kept being drawn to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say this too, like I wasn't a one-trick pony. I wasn't a rapper as a teenager. Like I didn't try to identify as a rapper. I think that's the problem with a lot of people that want a talent or want to work on a talent, is you try to define yourself all of a sudden by this talent because, like I got to be this. For me, I had a lot of talents, and I was constantly occupied with things I enjoyed. And rap poetry happened to be one of them that I did on my downtime, like late at night, or when I was with friends who like to put on instrumental and just do some freestyle, right? Like, so it wasn't something that I was obsessed with. Now I'm not so much obsessed with it, but I treat it differently. I treat it as it's as a craft, right? It's different. It's different than just working on a talent or a hobby, or trying to find a talent. It's different. And that only comes through, I would say, like the Alma 32 project, like the experimentation on the faith, or the experimentation on the talent, right? Not just saying, I'm going to try to be a yo-yo artist and spending 1 week trying to learn the yo-yo and then giving up. No, I'm talking year after year after year, after reading books, after seeking help, seeking mentors, trying different styles, not giving up. Like, we teach this when we want people to understand the Book of Mormon, that it's not a read this and a magical, horse is going to come down and speak to you and tell you that it's true. There is practice that needs to be coupled with the reading, heartfelt practice, intentional practice. And that's what it's been for me in the music. But there have been moments in my life where I have doubted, like, especially when I came back from my mission, like, should an adult like me, and I got married right away. And so I was really cognizant and aware of, like, I've got to grow up kind of thing. And part of that self-talk was, you can't be taken seriously in your wards coming back from a mission, in your stakes, if you're wanting to be serious and taken as like a spiritual person, as a rapper. You know what I mean? You can't do that in the church because that's against culture. Like nobody is that. Is kind of how my self conversation went after the mission. And so for a long time, I put my music aside because of that, because of shame is really what it was. It was like this shame of, I don't want to be judged by adults because I want to be respected. I mean, out on the mission, you kind of learn that. You're like, I want to get in with the zone leaders or the assistants to the president so that I don't get in trouble, or I can know what's coming if there's a transfer. Like, you want people to like you. And so coming back and wanting to do that now on the stake and ward level and like be an active member of the church, that was something that Satan tempted me with, right? Like, get rid of these talents, Leland. You shouldn't be doing this. You need to grow up. But that was the furthest thing from the truth for me. I realized I hit a plateau as an adult. My wife and I both did. We kind of went inactive for a while, not because of any faith crisis, but because of pure laziness. And I was depressed. I was working a job that I was not engaged in the gospel. I was not doing the basic things, the reading your scriptures every day, the praying, the fasting, the attending church, and just being legitimate and intentional like I had been my whole life. And we plateaued. And I hit a really deep depression. Had a close family member attempt suicide during this time, and it just broke me. It broke me completely. I couldn't work. I went unemployed for a long time. And had to basically like start over in my life and be like, what are you doing, Leland? What is the purpose here? Because I had fallen into some sales jobs and fallen out of school and was discontent with the things I was learning in higher education and just in the world in general, and was just upset, not really fitting in anywhere. And I had to repent. I had to get on my knees out on this canal out here by my house in the middle of the night one day and say, like, Lord, I'm in your hands. Like, I'm done. I'm done trying to be what I want to be and make 6 figures and get rich or do whatever. Like, I just want to do what you want me to do. And I want to be cured of this depression is really what I told him. I was like, I need help. And over a series of months, the Lord answered powerfully to me. Not things I think I'll share here, but one of the items related to this story is I felt impressed that my music was important. And so after those prayers, I started listening to some of my old stuff, and I was hit with emotion that was so powerful. It was unreal. Matched anything I had felt on my mission in watching people change their lives for the positive that I knew would affect generations. But listening again to my music, I was feeling that same spirit and realized that I had been ignoring what God had given me. I had been an unfaithful steward in my talent, and I had been ashamed and embarrassed to actually, walk in the front door with it to people and to everywhere that I went to say, hey, this is what I am, this is what I do, this is what I bring to the table, and I'd like to help. Like, if I'm embarrassed to do, nobody ever knows. Nobody, a lot of people in my ward still don't even know. I mean, I've gotten up and burned my testimony now the last couple of years to tell people, like, hey, this is what I do. I'm trying to put myself out there. I'm not trying to hide. And it's gone well. Like, every time I do that, it reciprocates. And the spirit of others who see what I'm doing and take it seriously or take the time to consider it, right? It pays dividends. It's resonant. And I realized that for myself. And so essentially the Lord answered my prayer and told me that I needed to create happiness, that creation was happiness, and that through my music, my talents, I was creating happiness. I know that my greatest happiness derives from my children. So there's something I helped create, and I'm helping create their personalities and their habits and their character. And that's creative power. And to me, doing it according to God's law brings lasting happiness. And so my talent, doing it according to God's law, right? According to, I'm trying to infuse as much of my testimony, personal studies, and doctrine, and like you mentioned earlier, like a rally cry for the saints. I am gathering Israel literally as a bard with beat and drum and lyric and shouts of joy. Like, we will shout when Christ comes. I'm shouting now, and I want others to shout with me, because I know my music helps me to remember what's important, to focus on these doctrines and things that I've embedded and baked and overlapped and hidden and put as Easter eggs all throughout my poetry and music. I'm waiting for the day that people find certain things that I put in my songs. And to me, that's eternal. That's going to last. I'm taking all of this with me, right? And I'm not out here to sell anything to anybody at the moment. In fact, a lot of my music I can't sell. I'm not. I would be restricted because I've just taken beats off that I've heard, and I've said, like, I can do that better. And I take the beat and I make a song to it. That's mine, totally original and different from everything else. And so I can't sell that, but I can share it for free with people, and they can listen to it. But that's not marketable. And so I don't get the Google ads. I don't get put in the algorithms for people because I'm not making anybody any money. I'm trying to change that, and I don't have anything against making money, but that's not my intention. And people don't see that with a product like this. They consider it a product, a consumable. When this isn't a consumable, I'm providing companionship. Like that's what this is for me. So I hope I answered a question that was in there. I don't know. I'm just rambling now, but this is freestyle. But that's why I went to Twitter initially. Was I got back into my music and started taking this seriously about 7 years ago, and maybe it was sooner than that. Maybe it was like 2017. Actually, yeah, it was the fall of 2017 when the sign in the heaven. You know what happened the fall of 2017 season of or festival of the trumpets, right? Rosh Hashanah. That date in September 2017 was the sign in heaven that a lot of the Gentile Christians talking about apocalypse and things are referencing as Revelation 12, playing out in the heavens with the woman standing on the moon and the sun and Jupiter being born out of her womb and out. I don't know if you're familiar with any of that symbolism, but that
I'm aware of it. So 2017 was a really weird year for me personally as well. That's when I ended up getting stationed overseas in Japan, and I had probably some pretty spiritually horrific things that occurred, and so there is a lot of symbology in your music, and that's what I kind of enjoy. Right now, I'm kind of mediating on one of the lines, one of your more recent songs. I want to say it was Bloodbath? It was on the Mountaintop record.
Yeah.
There's a phrase. I don't want you to tell me what it is because I'm still ruminating on it. The flames bloodlust. The flames of Sennacherib wood, right? I just love the way that sounds and the symbolisms of it and the history of it. There's a lot of deeper meaning into it. But that's something that I've also discovered that is also what I kind of wanted to ask, kind of segue away from music. And as we've discussed it, talents, and how do we discover what our talents are? How do we discern if it is something worthy of investing a lot of time and knowing where to go from there? I know for me, I've always been a jack of all trades. I've always been able to pick something up, do it. And then I have this like gift of commitment to whatever I do. I accept and I am fully committed to it. And even if I'm wrong, I'm still committed to it. And something that's always held me back, even from a child, is anxiety and feeling embarrassed. Like if I go play basketball or baseball or try to do this, I'm going to be embarrassed. And I don't want that. That embarrassment would be too great to experience. So it's better to not do anything at all. And so as a kid, I became a bookworm, and I'm well too read for person my age. I was reading stuff I shouldn't have. If anybody's seen Men in Black, I was the little girl reading quantum mechanics books as a little kid. But anyway, it's been really hard to try to find what is a talent, just because I kind of do all these different things, and what is something that is going to be beneficial for others. And I feel like that's what takes a hobby and changes it to the New Testament definition of a talent, of the parable of men are given certain wages, and some of them go and spend it and get extra back. And one servant decides, it's better if I just bury it in the ground, and that way I can just give it back. And so I feel like a lot of us, due to embarrassment, anxiety, or uncertainty, just decide to bury our talents. And just like you said, like I was just doing this as a joke, not realizing this is a talent you have been given. So it's that's where I'm at, trying to discern what aspects of my life or things that I do are talents. For those who don't know, I do a lot of amateur sewing. I've made kilts and costumes and cosplay. I really like doing it. I'm good at it, but not as good as I want to be. I'm very critical of it, but I question if that's worthy of my time, because it takes a long time to do these things. So if someone was trying to discern if it is a talent, obviously they should pray and ponder about it. But is there anything else that might be helpful for them to, this is something I should do? Or is it something that is going to be discovered years in doing?
I think both. I don't know if there's a need to say like you can't have one without the other. For me, there are two elements to a talent that would allow me personally to say I'm going to take this more seriously. And those two that I found in the talents that I've focused on more recently are what does this have to do with eternity, right? Or gathering Israel, right? What does this have to do with my immediate gospel needs and those of those around me? And then two, what is the reciprocation for this talent? If it's a talent that only I benefit from, is that really a talent that I'm going to get dividends back investing in? Like the parable of the talents, where those talents are invested in something and they get something in return. And the amount of return is, that's important, obviously, in this parable of the talents. So for me, is your talent reciprocating something? So it's easy for me to say that with the music, yeah, because I get feedback. People message me a lot to let me know how my music helps or what they experience and feel with it, or they ask me doctrinal questions because of it. And it starts this dialogue that's eternal. These are eternal principles, and it invites that. And so for me, it's worthwhile. Anything that does that is going to be worthwhile, no matter how small or insignificant you may think it seems. If it's reciprocating one-to-one, even, it's worth it. Now you can look and see, do I have other talents that maybe reciprocate more? Maybe I can reach more people with these. I think you're doing that here with the podcast. I think you've obviously got a natural talent for it. And this is going to be important going forward for Israel, for us in the gathering, in being able to provide spaces for conversations like this to be heard. This wasn't a reality or a possibility 20 years ago. And so this is our generation's task, you and I, to find these types of reciprocal talents and abilities that we can become expert at, and so that the Lord can use us. That's really how I see it. So in terms of, like you mentioned, seamstress being, or seams, what is the male version called? I can't remember. Tailor, being a tailor. This will be magnificently important in the coming apocalypse, right? We joke and call it an apocalypse, but this is what the prophets have warned us and counseled us to do, to learn how to sow. Spencer W. Kimball was all about this, and everybody going back, that everybody needs to learn how to sow. For when these terrible trials come upon us, that's going to be a skill in high demand. You will be an asset to whatever local area you are in by focusing on those talents. And oftentimes, like right now, if we're not aware of that bigger picture of prophecy and what our purpose is in the gathering of Israel, we might just say, like, oh, this isn't really helping now. But if we could see what the end product of our talents looks like and how that could affect many people if we apply it, that's where I think we need to evaluate talents from a top end. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. I know I know we're about in the same peer group as far as age. In high school, one of my assignments was I had to create a MySpace, right? And that died. One of the assignments I had was to do YouTube when YouTube just came out. It had been out for a year at that point. And I didn't really do anything with those, right? I did it because it was there. I had no interest in it. But what I've discovered is I'm not an early adopter, but I've been at the foreground of that. So before America knew what TikTok was, I was out here in Japan. It was all the rage. I had it, I would look at it and do things with it, but I didn't really think, oh, I could do that. And I feel like that's another thing that people do. They can be a part of the significant events, but not have the connection of you could do something with that. But I've also felt like that's also a blessing and a curse as well. When it comes to Instagram, I've had Instagram for a very, very long time. And I was very influenced by a lot of fitness influencers. And I imagined, oh, if I just get into a certain body, I can start doing this and start doing that. And so basically everybody who's into fitness is very influenced by Instagram. And it's so saturated with so many fitness people that right now to try to make a career with it, it's almost unimaginable just because there's so many in there. And that's why you get to see all these videos of people doing crazy stuff, because that's the only way that they can draw interest.
Right.
So I think there is a blessing in not being an early adopter, but and then being able to recognize these things before, that way you're not like, oh, I wasted all the time, I could do that. And so there's a couple things that I've noticed lately that, and then kind of prayed and just kind of ruminated and ponder on, like I should really go this direction. And for instance, for my schooling and academia, and through influence of my mentors and professors and program directors, I'm going a certain path in academia, which is funny, is because I have huge issues with academia, but I'm going down that path. Um, and I think that's something that people need to be cognizant of, is that nothing happens for no reason.
Yeah.
And that's something that I personally debate on a theological level. The philosophy of predestination and how much free agency we have. Is it predetermined? Are we enacting? Are we going off of a script that we don't know about? And that's how we're being tested, or the amount of free will and agency that we do have, or is there some determinism? And that's just something I just ponder about, because a lot of the things I've experienced have kind of, I'm open to,
Yeah.
oh, I'm open to that. And
I kind of sidestep all those determinism questions with just saying, what's wrong with just being optimally
mhm,
or just optimal, like just having the plan of salvation be that efficient, right? That no
mhm,
matter what your decision is, um, it's not going to be based on the single actions in a moment, unless those are very egregious, right? Like unless you're breaking a certain threshold with those actions. But it's the accumulation of your spirit growth, not just your mortal temporal life, but your spirit as well plays into these factors. And these are things that we can't calculate. You and I can't, but ultimately will be calculated in terms of how everything can be turned for a benefit for us, or for towards our condemnation. And it depends on our action taken here. So that's where I see, like, I don't see it as determinism or anything like that, in terms of, yeah, maybe I promise to say, hey, I know once I get down there and wake up that I'm going to have these abilities to unite people as a bard, right? Or as a poet, or as an entertainer, or as a shouter to the public, if that's my talent, to shout and get people to notice things. Then I probably made a promise that I would try my hardest to yell at as many people as possible to look towards
mhm.
Christ, to look towards the temple, to look towards their covenants, to prepare and protect themselves for what's coming. And so, like, I don't know, that's just my I think it's efficiency more than it is like, oh, the Lord perfectly predicted that this is what you were going to say. It's no, you made your decision and he had a plan to take care of it regardless. Like there were so many other factors he could move around your decision, that he was going to make it towards your benefit, just like a father would in the lives of their child. I don't predetermine what my kids choose or do, but I see that they take interest in certain things, and I have so many options available to me that I can create the perfect environment that their choice is going to be beneficial in the end for them.
That's an
I don't know.
interesting point. Um, yeah, something else I'm really into is studying theology, and right now I've been on a bender of studying Islam. I think that has to come to my childhood. If we go back to there, uh, I've shared this on a blog before, but I'll briefly share it here. As a kid, I lived in the Rockies in a small town, and there was literally no neighbors around. I had one neighbor kid. His parents really didn't like me, so we didn't hang out as much or whatever. So it was like, if I wasn't at school, there was literally nobody around. I was more likely to run into jaguar or into cougars and bears than I was a person. So I spent my time inside, and the internet back then was AOL or whatever. So at school, I'd get a lot of books so I could take them home. Um, as a freshman, I just started feeling a desire for something to know. And I think that has to come down to, I had a grandparent that I really liked passed away. And so the idea of death just was really present. And I started studying religions. And at the time, I basically became like a neo-pagan Taoist, which is like a really weird thing. It doesn't make sense, but that's what I was doing. Unbeknownst to me, my mother was going through the same thing. She worked at a medical facility, and one of the doctors there was a member of the church. And during their lunches, they would have a Bible study, and he was the only one that was able to give her a succinct answer. And one that made sense. And eventually we ended up having the missionaries over. And at that point, I also discovered Wiccanism and, Masonry and all these other things. And so I'm just kind of going down two tracks. And so I think that's where my curiosity for religion, while also skepticism of religion, comes from, because there's so many aspects of it. And I see a lot of these incoherencies. And the best way I can describe it is what I heard from someone else. I don't know who said it, but it was theology is like going to an art museum and seeing a Monet. From a distance, it's beautiful, and every religion just makes sense. There's a picture it's telling. But the second you start stepping closer, you start to see the paint and the stipulation and the messiness of it. And there's a lot of flaws that you begin to see to come to the present. And at the end of the day, it takes faith to accept whether or not that is a good piece of art at that point, right? Because from a distance, it looks beautiful, but once you get up, it's ugly, it's gross, it's grotesque. You can see the clumps of the oil on the canvas, and it's just not beautiful. And I think that came from somebody who went to theology school, which, on a side note, I've heard is the best place to make atheists is theology school, because if you start studying it deep enough, you realize, wait, this is not pretty at all. There's a lot of errors. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. And so on that aspect, and finding discernment, you layer a lot of these philosophies and theologies and doctrines of the church in such a unique way. It really makes you think about that and draw. It's almost like you're asking people to step closer to the canvas. Come on, take a look. And to then ask and to seek that spiritual knowledge for themselves. And so I know I've been touched by your music. And as I mentioned before, I ruminate on it all. And it's kind of gotten me down a kick. I have some stuff I've not been working as diligently on, but I'm trying to release some songs myself, more in the metal and deathcore stuff, but finding these talents. But back to discernment of religion and theology. How did you get into that aspect? Were you one of those missionaries that was like, hey guys, I found a book from Talmage?
Yeah,
Or
actually I was.
oh no.
I was not I wasn't trying to show off to everybody all the time, but we anybody that was in my small groups, my mission was so that a lot of our areas and zones and districts were relatively small and disparate, like spread out, because we were in central Mexico. In some of the boondock areas is where I spent, like Tapachula, where they have a lot of the Mayan ruins and things like that. I spent 6 months of my mission there, and each of the districts were pretty far apart. But when we would get together, it would be like a couple nights that they'd get to spend, or we'd all be grouped together. And it was like a deep doctrine fest where everybody wanted to like feed each other on a deeper level, to like dig deeper roots, right? And that's how I saw it. I think for me though, I owe a lot of my zeal for I don't know how to say it, like the breadth of the gospel that I enjoy, to, again, some of the like talents that I have just been blessed with in my family. And I, again, honor my father and my mother for those. They're wonderfully intelligent people and have taught me so much. I have always been kind of the smart kid. I skipped a grade. I skipped, what grade was it? I don't even know, 6th grade. I never went to 6th grade.
Mm.
I had a scholarship for college out of 8th grade for an essay I wrote because I told them I want to be a herpetologist. So like I've always had kind of a big brain, but wanted to be the cool kid too. Again, with the rapping and trying to fit in high school and stuff like that. So there's this dichotomy for me of, am I the nerdy geek kid that's really smart that everybody cheats off of, because I was, or am I the cool kid that, it gets invited to the parties and the girls like that was like the space I kind of lived in, and had a hard time staying constant, like to the gospel and to morals. When you're trying to please other people, it doesn't work. But really, I just lost my train of thought. What were we talking about? You got to remind me.
Theology. Where
Right.
where did
Okay.
you get introduced to?
So fast forward to my mission. I get out on my mission, and it was a miracle that I got out of my mission because of my teenage years. And I was in a threesome in my companionship in the MTC. three elders, and one of them, Elder Kearns, out of the Eastern Coast. I remember him and I love him. Elder Kearns, if you ever hear this, I love you. but this elder had every chapter heading of the Book of Mormon memorized. In the first, like, we're in the MTC and he's sitting there telling us he has every chapter heading memorized, and me, I maybe had read the Book of Mormon once, like through seminary and things like that in high school, but I felt woefully inadequate as a missionary, like preparing to go out on the mission, that I didn't know gospel squat. And so it was intimidating. And also coming from the environment where I was the cool kid, right? And I was the one that everybody kind of looked up to, that had skills and talents and kind of a leader amongst my peers. I realized really quickly as a missionary, if I didn't know the doctrine, nobody was going to want to be cool with me. Like, at least that's how I felt in the MTC. And I was like, I'm going to go all in on this. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be learning. Like, I didn't realize that. I knew the gospel was an part of my life. And this, I think, goes to kind of just the conditions I grew up in and the attitude that I had in terms of our family. You know, I'm a generational Mormon family. And this was like the attitude that we grew up in. So it's no wonder that a lot of my siblings have left the church without having like strong gospel roots actually in the gospel. It's more all in this social thing. And that's why a lot of my siblings have left, for social conflict. But getting into the theology part of it, I had my dad send me all kinds of books that you probably weren't supposed to read on your mission. So like, my bathroom reading was Mormon doctrine. Every time I went to the bathroom, it was just read a couple sections of Mormon doctrine. And 6 months as a missionary, and I was done with that, especially in Mexico, being in the bathroom a lot. And so I would read constantly wherever I was. Books I could get my hands on. Lectures on Faith was probably my favorite book. As a Man Thinketh changed my life. Like, all these books I started to read because I wanted a gospel knowledge. And it's just like the Doctrine and Covenants say, I think like leaveth the light. And once you get addicted to that kind of accumulation and seeing how it broadens your horizons and connects everything, it was addictive to me. And I wanted to know the answers to everything. Now, on the question of Revelation, as a young missionary trying to understand and catch up, and I felt like I was behind, and so I was doing overtime. I was staying up later beyond when you were supposed to and reading. They disencourage that now, but that was huge for me, doing that, making that sacrifice. And it was intentional. It wasn't like I was trying to break the rules to goof off. I was breaking the rules so I could finish Jesus the Christ. I was breaking the rules so I could finish the doctrines of salvation that my dad had sent me, right? Like, because these had answers to questions that investigators were posing to us. They had answers that I was asking myself as I was reading the scriptures. So Nephi has had a huge impact on my life, as I think everybody in a member of church, anybody who's read the Book of Mormon, Nephi is going to have a huge impact on your life. But in particular, his ability to hear what his father had told him in terms of a vision or revelation or knowledge from heaven that his dad had received. And then for him to go and straight ask for it, just be like, I can do that. Like, I can, he did that, I can do that, right? And that attitude has stuck with me. And that's what I encourage everybody to do. And we always tell people to read the scriptures and then ask God, have him speak directly to you. Well, I took that really literally as a missionary. And I'd come across passages in the Bible that were like not missionary talk, right? It wasn't something I was going to teach an investigator or anything like that, but I would ask a question and then pray really earnestly to Heavenly Father and say, why did this happen? What is the white stone in Revelation 2:17, right? I would ask these questions and I would get strong responses, like immediate responses. And it wasn't like a voice like God or Moroni showing up and telling me this is the answer. It was always like, you idiot, you are jumping way ahead. Like, you are a baby in the gospel, and you think you're going to ask God to answer these questions that likely thousands of other people have already asked, and not just asked, but I bet you there are hundreds of books on this topic, and you haven't even thought to look at them, Leiland. That was the answer I got, like direct. I knew it was from God. I knew it was truth because I couldn't deny that. I couldn't deny that. Oh yeah, well, somebody's probably written about this, and I haven't really studied everything here, and I could look. And so after asking in sincere prayer like that and receiving strong revelation, in my journal, I have this clear as day, and this is huge in my life, like a huge part of who I am, is that I knew that I had to make lists of questions and that it was going to take effort after the mission to really track down all the sources and give this the time and attention that it needed for me to expect God to answer. Because he had already answered and was like, you jackass, like, you can't ask that. You need to go see what else has been answered about this already. You're not some Joseph Smith in uptown New York who doesn't have access to anything. You live in 2020, Leiland, and you can access the internet and find things. Be responsible. Like, that's the answers I would get. And I testify, like, that's truth. And the moment as an adult I stopped being busy. I'm putting up air quotes. And I decided to prioritize my gospel questions. I went back to my mission books and I pulled out to start. That's where I started. All the questions I had written down in my mission diaries that the Lord had told me to seek later. I started seeking them in earnest, and God answered. That played into what I studied in college. That played into what I study now. That plays into what I post about on Twitter now. All of what you see now is the condensed product of the aggregation of small gains in that vein of seeking answers to these questions that the gospel prompted in my own heart, in my own mind, and taking them seriously, that God was going to answer them for me and put it all together in a puzzle that produces a picture that makes sense. So that's what I did. In college, I studied interdisciplinary arts and sciences. It was, to me, a choose your own adventure degree because I had planned to go to law school. I ultimately didn't. But this degree, I was able to choose like what subjects I wanted to focus on. So I focused on things that I knew were going to answer the questions I had for my mission. So I focused on astrophysics, I focused on history, and I focused on history, astrophysics, and philosophy because I had a lot of philosophical questions, I'm sure, like yourself. And so I studied and read a lot of philosophy and a lot of astrophysical theory. I was into metaphysics and astrophysical theory, not so much in the hard mathematics, because and we could talk about that, I see problems in such a heavy reliance on mathematics in theorization. And that's, I think, the problem of modern standard cosmology and science and physics in general, is their heavy reliance on mathematical models that aren't taking in all the input. They're stunted from the growth because of the conditions that the mathematical models impose on the reality of the test. So anyways, that's why I move and gravitate towards more theory and things that can be observed, things that make sense and make connections of things that are obvious or symbols. And that's what my college studies were all about, and that's what my music is all about. That's what so all of those things I've learned along the way, from my mission through my college studies in these weird esoteric topics and things, to the more recent ones where I've been able to find coherent web of alternative theories that now match the gospel better than anything I've ever found in my life. And they match things specifically to that Joseph Smith taught that other people think is a pariah, or they're unwilling to look at, even as members of the church, that he said certain things because it might not compute with what's popularly accepted. But those ideas under the new alternative paradigms that I've explored make perfect sense. And in fact, make it so that I have a stronger, deeper testimony in Joseph Smith than most normal people. It's not just the Book of Mormon that I see. I see he restored cosmology, and that his restoration of cosmology is the truth. And it's going to overcome everything here in the near future. Like, we're in our lifetimes, we're going to see Joseph Smith's cosmology overtake the standard model. That's a lot. I'm sorry.
No, you were riffing, man. I love it. That freestyle is there.
Yeah.
That I like impromptu conversations. They're more genuine. Going back to how you were talking about the mission. I guess I would say I grew up as a high schooler in Utah. I ended up graduating from Utah, and I was a cultural member, which is very common nowadays.
Yeah.
I would say that's also in part because a lot of the wards we were in, I was the only priest. If I was the only priest, sometimes there was not even an inactive priest. It was just me. And then one of the other elders or high priests would be up there on the stand with me as for sacrament meeting. And I was never challenged to actually study in seminary. I really enjoyed my seminary teacher and was able to have the same seminary teacher for like all 3 years of high school. And he really was the only one that was challenging me to look at things, but still I didn't really do anything with that. And I didn't put that discipline in there. And even though I had joined the church at 14 and gone to seminary, some church drama happened and I never got credit for that first year of seminary. And so in high school, I was told, hey, you're not going to graduate seminary. You're going to get a 3-year, not a 4-year. And there's going to be some stuff to that. And I was just like, oh, whatever, okay, I'll try. And it was just like, I've already been all over this stuff. I'm not really learning anything from it. And it's on my own. And I have other things I'm into in high school. So I just kind of threw it out and didn't really look into it. So when I got on my mission, there's a lot that I understood the basics, but I didn't really understand everything. And I feel like that happens with a lot of missionaries so much that I remember one day, one of the missionaries came home with like the biggest grin. I was like, "Where were you two?" And they were like, "Oh, we were at Brother So and So's house, and he gave us a copy of the Follett sermon." And we were
Discourse.
like,
Nice.
"Oh my gosh!" And it was just like that. On my mission, the rarest ensigns were from the 70s because that's where the best doctrine was.
They were like sacred manuscripts, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. My only stuff, I have a journal and stuff. I didn't really keep those questions, but we would use those ensigns to cover our planners and stuff, and we'd always talk and think about it. And apparently that was happening, and I assume other elders and sisters were asking these questions. And um, our response from the mission president was, preach my gospel and the works of canon. You don't have time to read anything else.
Yeah. No, I was told the same. Trust me, I was
And
told the same.
yeah, and he even challenged us, put it to test, see what happens, read only from what you've been told you're allowed to read. And then he said, if you're really into it, come with me after. And there was a couple people who hit him up that they felt that they had understood that they wanted something more. And by the end of it, there was only one person that was still doing a specialized reading program with him. And there's just a lot of stuff I came across, and I just kind of like, put it on the shelf and just kind of ignored it. And then when I came home from the mission, I also ended up in a post-mission depression and had a lot of life stuff go on, and just kind of left it. And so in the last couple of years, I've really been coming back in. By 2018, I started actively going back to church again and coming across this stuff while still being naturally curious of other religions. And for those that know me on Twitter, I've been on a bender of studying Islam for almost 2 years now.
Yeah.
And I don't have my answers yet. And so I feel like that's okay. And it seems like you even came across the same thing, that it's okay to have questions. There's nothing wrong with that. We're always going to have questions. And sometimes we're never going to get the answer that we want. We want that angelic angel Moroni in our bedroom at 3 a.m. telling us the way forward. But at the same time, if we look to examples of those that have had those experiences, unless you're really grounded in the church, all that experience is going to be a condemnation against you. Like Layman and Lemuel. How many times did an angel come down and say, knock it off? And then they still were like disagreeing. Oh, you're doing it wrong. You're not really in charge of us. And so I feel like we are led to the knowledge that we do have as a reward for our faithfulness and our discipline and doing the basics.
Now, here's something I want to say too. And for me, this was pivotal going through college as a return missionary. I could sense intensely the false doctrines being preached, like especially my philosophy classes and history classes, or I had a lot of religion classes, and they would talk about Mormonism and things like that, and I would speak up, and the teacher would know that I was a member, and so conversations would be intense. But I always went at school, and what was being taught by the world, we'll call it the Gentile world, right? What was being taught by the Gentile world to me was always filtered by what I knew was the gospel truth in terms of the restored gospel. I had studied enough of the foundational stuff. I don't know if you saw my thread on like 50 books I read in my 20s or whatever. Like a lot of those books are really foundational in understanding just the gospel, the plan of salvation, basically. And Elder Oaks, he's been out there recently telling the members, like, a lot of the struggles with people falling to Babylonian and Gentile philosophies is that they don't understand the gospel plan. They just don't understand the basics of it. And they might go to church and they might be super faithful in the social aspects of it, being a cultural member, but their understanding of the doctrine is just not sufficient. And for me, I felt blessed enough that going through college, I knew that my gospel base was sufficient, because I was having spiritual experiences in class where the Spirit was telling me, see, this is where the gospel explains what they don't understand. Or see, this is where we have an answer and they're saying there's no answer. Or see, the Spirit would tell me, these ideas that they're presenting you are based on an assumption that doesn't take into account God or the creation. Like all these things were just powerfully being echoed in my mind by the Spirit as I was going through college. And to be able not just to learn what they were teaching me and to be able to produce, the assignments that they wanted and give it back to them. But internally, the revelation was happening. I was being transformed. This knowledge was I was consuming this knowledge, and it was being transmuted and added and synthesized to the gospel framework that I had already established through my own diligent faith and seeking of revelation. So like my testimony was growing despite being in an academic environment that was hostile towards faith. And that's really what it is. And it's grown into that even more so now in 2020, and what you're going through, I'm sure, in your academia and with the pressures of conforming to certain narratives or disciplines or what you can and can't say to certain people. It's ridiculous. And for me, the Spirit has always said, like, this isn't how the gospel works. Like, yeah, there's hierarchy and certain compartmentalization of things, but it's all interconnected. Nothing's in a silo. Nothing's independent. It's all interdependent. Yet we live in a world, and especially in science and academia, where independence is seen as like prime. Right?
Pseudoscientist, flat earther.
Yeah.
That there's so much dogma in the modern academic institution and the scientific community that it is absolutely disgusting. And it's like, were you guys not paying attention in history class? Do you guys not understand? I'm really anti-Greek philosophy, and I'm really anti-postmodernism. A lot of our woes of society have come strictly from this whole, we can do it without God, and we can establish this culture that will have rights and ethics and morals without religion. And look at what it's giving us. It's given us this cancel culture of, if you're not with the current narrative, you're rogue, you're a heretic, you're backwards. And it's creating a divisiveness. But I also think that's the I hate to use it, latter days thing. Divisiveness and dissension is just going to continue to grow and get worse from here. Where if you even share facts, you're being canceled. And it's really sad. My least favorite hashtag right now is trust the science, because if anybody has a brain, that it's question the science, you fool. I'm not saying that to be a conspiracy theorist or in that nature. I just have common sense, and I've always enjoyed history, and so I know these times where science has been absolutely wrong. I mention it all the time, but Giordano Bruno was literally burned at the stake because he realized that there was multiple planets out there that could be Earth-like. And the Catholic Church wanted him to recant that because they couldn't accept if there was one Jesus or multiple Jesus. How would that work? There's life on other planets. How is Jesus going to save them? And even his jailer was like, he refused to recant, and eventually he was burned at the stake for it. In modern times, in the 1800s, a Hungarian doctor, Ignaz Semmelweis, is known as the father of modern hygiene, was trying to determine why the two different wards in the hospital for childbirth, the male doctors had a 5 times death rate for women getting what was child fever or child bed fever and dying in childbirth. And the midwives had very relatively few. And it bothered him, and he had very many different theories as to why. And he started working through testing his hypothesis, and one aspect, he actually thought it was the women were giving birth on their backs. So let's flip them to their side and let's do these things. And he ended up having to take a break, and then a colleague of his ended up dying. And then it was determined that the colleague accidentally was working on a cadaver, a dead corpse, and accidentally poked themselves with a instrument. And that's when it dawned on him that there's something going on. While he didn't understand that germs were a thing, that's what was killing, because the doctors were going and working on cadavers and doing medical school, and then going and giving birth and not washing their hands. And so they were cross-contaminating, and the mothers were getting sick, and that's why they were dying. He was ridiculed so much. He was also he wasn't a nice person. about his opinions, that he was right. That didn't help, but he was eventually fired from his job, and unfortunately he ended up being institutionalized. They think it could have been Alzheimer's or syphilis, and he ended up dying shortly after. But still, that's one instance where he was completely against the society at the time. And how many times has that happened in history where there's this idea of the accepted narrative, and it turns out that was completely wrong? And there's a thought, and I've had somebody tell me this, it's because we figured out and we have these things put in order for us to know that we are on the right path, and that there's dogma in there still. You're not. So there's a lot in scientific knowledge that is factual, and a lot of it is obfuscation, like you said. Anybody who gets into astrophysics or cosmology, it is all high mathematics to basically try to make things make sense, and string theory and quantum realms and multi dimensions, that in order to make our theory make sense, we just have to keep adding things to it. And then when you take an observational perspective of nature, it doesn't work like
It's
that.
Occam's razor. No, it's the simpler path. Here, I have a thought on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
This, I see it as a product of apostasy, and this is an apostasy that's been gradual since Adam. Because think of this: the original philosophy given to Adam at the beginning of the creation, it was complete. It was interdisciplinary in every aspect of nature. So true philosophy for Adam was also true religion, was also true science. There wasn't any type of separation between these, what we call fields now, right? Or whatever you want to call them, disciplines. It was all the same. But as you distance yourself from God and the true nature of reality, which must be coherent, because we look out in the universe and it's all coherent. So something's holding it all into place, right? And so there must be some greater natural laws at play that were once known. Well, that's what I'm presenting. They were once known to Adam, and then we fell, and so things bifurcate or they fracture. Let's fast forward to the great apostasy, right? Jesus Christ restores the true church, true religion, right? The Greeks think they've restored true philosophy, but with Christ's church, you have a restoration of not just a church, but the true philosophy, the true religion, the true science, everything, right? This is why he was performing miracles and people couldn't explain it. Scientists couldn't explain it, right? But in our gospel, it works. Like, the true religion is true science. Miracles are not some they're a process or a law that is just not currently understood. That's what Talmage calls it, right? We believe that. We believe that there's a natural process happening when miracles occur, when somebody's healed, when Jesus walked on the water, that something physically happened, that laws were obeyed, whether it's the particles themselves that moved, or whether there are certain plasma laws or something that the Lord was using, calling on light from heaven to, take away his gravity for a moment, or to allow buoyancy on the surface, whatever it might have been, right? We don't know, but it was obedience to these natural laws that are interconnected. The great apostasy, with Greek philosophy taking over the philosophical realm and basically trashing all other philosophies, ancient, indigenous, and otherwise, and merging with the Catholic Church, or the whore of the earth, right? What we call it, where they tried to throw in the philosophy into the religion and totally corrupted the religion. And not just that, but then we had science come in as well to separate itself from religion and philosophy and metaphysics. So you had this bifurcation right after Christ is crucified. And to me, this was Satan's ultimate dissolution, before he could consolidate all the broken parts into his one world government, his millennial reign, his kingdom, his ultimate last days conspiracy. That's what we were all marching towards. That's what Daniel's vision is marching towards, with the long legs of the fourth beast kingdom, or the fourth kingdom of Daniel's vision and character to Nebuchadnezzar, right? Being a bifurcated Rome, in that you had the Orthodox Christian Church break from the Roman Catholic Church, and these are the two legs. And these things infected science, religion, and philosophy through the world. The whole Western society is now at war with everybody else in these philosophies of separation, where we want everything to be separate and in its own box, and they can't mix. You can't talk to me about cosmology, Leland, and bring religion into it. That's not science, right? Like, that's the attitude. No. And for me, knowing the truth about God and having had revelation, and I know that God is real and Jesus Christ is the Son of Man. Like, I know these things. Knowing these things, there's no way I can take that seriously. Science and religion and philosophy have to correspond. So if there's a philosopher, no matter how poignant and sophisticated his arguments are, if it discredits a coherent one story that includes Jesus Christ and his plan of salvation and immortality and resurrection and repentance and all these things, then okay, that's great. But if it doesn't include those, something's missing, right? And I approach everything with that aspect. Now, even in which I think we're going to is the electric universe type ideas, or these alternative cosmological ideas that I tease and try to teach or bring awareness to. They have this recombination element to it, that they are interdisciplinary by nature. They're not coming in though with solutions, and that's the problem. That's why they're so easily dismissed by people in the mainstream, is because a lot of the people, like a Galileo or like you mentioned, a Giordano Bruno, like they're pointing out problems. They're not necessarily saying, hey, this is the solution and I know the answers, but they're saying this can't be. Why are we pretending that it is? And they're the ones that get ostracized. And so Joseph Smith and everybody that I mean, Parley P. Pratt, Orson Pratt, all the early scientists and philosophers and great artists of the latter days, they were all about these alternative ideas that Tesla was onto, that Christian Birkeland was all about, that Hannes Alfvén later got into, that you had guys like Immanuel Velikovsky also validating and asking these big questions to the mainstream, saying, why are we ignoring these big questions? And they got ostracized. They were the early cancel culture that we're seeing today. Now, I just get labeled as flat earther, like you said, or pseudoscience or whatever it is, as trying to find something new when I'm not. I'm actually trying to uncover the old. I'm trying to say, no, these are old ideas that have been ignored. I'm not trying to ask for anything new or seek anything new. I'm saying we already have it. And Joseph Smith laid a framework for us to see who's telling the truth. Because these guys that are talking these alternative theories, they open it up so the question for God remains. We can't determine a beginning or an end of the universe. That's ridiculous, according to these alternative ideas. And that matches what Joseph Smith says about space and time being infinite, or space and matter being infinite, right? Not time, but space and matter being infinite. And there's no way that there was a beginning or an end. There is none. We've seen that in If You Could Hide to a Co-op. There is no end, right? Yet we as humans, and needing to stamp a book on it and say, here's science and here's religion and here's philosophy, nice and tight in their books, we have to say there's a beginning and an end. We know, and here's how old everything is. It's not true. It's all fake. And that's my message in my music and in what I teach and what I preach and the things that I've learned, is that we've got to be better at standing up for truth, because we're trying too hard to go along with Babylon in their same, like you said, historically patternized apostasies. And here we are, just like we're reading in Israel and how they adopted the Phoenicians and the Canaanites and all the things and ideas and philosophies that they had, right? We're doing the same thing. We're doing the exact same thing. And it's going to take God himself to intervene. That's where we're at. It's crazy, but that's my 2 cents in terms of like the fracturization of science, religion, and philosophy. To me, that's the crux of why it doesn't make sense. Why, if you want to try and be an expert in science and ignore the philosophical or the metaphysical or the spiritual side of things, it's not going to work. You won't find the answers. It's only when we consider them all together that the spirit can say, okay, now you have the tools and the bandwidth for me to tell you where the truth is.
Backing up in what you discussed, I know anybody that's read Jesus to Christ, early, I would say 1900s, prophets and apostles were very anti-Catholic, and that was a huge movement. I personally don't think that that's what the reference is. I know everyone immediately goes to it, and there's been a lot of strong theories, but I really feel like the horror of the church is this modern culture that this is the most accepted way to do things, and this is how you will operate, and these are accepted ideas, and it rejects that basis of faith. And I also would really be inclined to also say that could be also Greek philosophy. And for those that don't know, that early Christianity was heavily influenced by Greek philosophy. And one of the biggest things that the Greeks felt was that matter is inherently evil. And if God is all good and all knowing and all powerful, he can't have a corporal body, because if matter is evil, then God cannot have that. So he must be incorporeal. And basically it went everywhere. And the modern Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox and Russian Orthodox have literally all been affected by it. And when I started studying Islam, something I erroneously thought was, oh, wow, they're untouched by Greek philosophy. Several months later, that is entirely false. They are. If you start going into the weeds of Islam, besides just overall collectively, there's a lot of ideas that you can't know God because God is unknowable. And I've had some things that I've thought and pondered on that aspect, but Greek philosophy is really permeated, and it's continued to now. Postmodernism is heavily influenced on the idea of Greek philosophy, and basically saying that humanity doesn't need a religion except for this cultural, and it's doing the same thing. Everyone's doing the same thing that religious people do, and they make fun of us for being in a cult, but they're doing the same thing. They're indoctrinating each other on this idea. It's most successful. I remember one of the classes I just went through. I can't remember the name of the class, but let's call it 101 wokeism. Literally everybody in the class was disagreeing on some things, and what the course book was saying. There was one on a subject dealing with race, and the people in the class that were of that race were like very adamant that the course was wrong and that these things were not correct. And that's why I think that the reference to the great whore is this accepted knowledge, human knowledge rather.
Well, let me present where my paradigm here, it
Mhm.
doesn't disagree with you. It only adds to what you're saying, because that layer of understanding that you're talking about is metaphysical. You're talking about a spiritual, like ethereal, philosophical
Mhm.
version of a whore and riding the
Yeah.
beast, right? Or the whore of Babylon who rides and participates with the beast. So again, that's great. But to me, there is also the literal layer. Like, you don't separate them. You can't say, no, this is
Yeah.
what it means. It doesn't mean this other thing. Because even the word body to us, it means multiple things. It can't just mean, no, a body only means your physical carbon molecules
Mhm.
put together here on this planet. No, we know that there's a spiritual body. We know that there's a church body. We know there's a temple body. We know there's a heavenly body. We know there's different iterations or layers to this. So for me, it's illogical to dismiss the Catholic Church and their role in corrupting Christianity and being that whore who rides the governments of the world through the dark ages and in the name of conquest, right, spreading Christianity. This is what a
Yeah.
lot of atheists and ignorant people will say, is that, oh, what good is Christianity done? Look at all the wars it started, blah, blah. Well, that's exactly the product of the whore riding the beast, because the
Mhm.
beast makes war, okay? And it's in the name of the church or of the whore of God that they're doing it. That's how all holy wars have been waged. They subvert the gospel of God and claim heavenly authority. That's how it's always been. So to dismiss or to balk at the Catholic Church being called the whore, I just laugh, because really what it is a product of moral relativism in the last days here, and people not wanting to offend the Catholics,
Mm.
which is fine. I'm not offending and saying that you as a member of the Catholic Church is a whore. I'm saying the institution and the doctrines and the philosophies and the science that your religion teaches is corrupt. It's been corrupted because you're riding the governments of the world and whoring yourself out to everyone and changing, just like we see with the popes now, and that, oh, it's okay to be gay, it's okay to do this, it's okay to do whatever. They're just changing on a whim for public appeal. That's riding the beast. That's the whore of the earth. That's whoring yourself out and not being faithful to your God. So I get it. I get the need to be cautious and not want to offend. And I know that other people and even general authorities have probably said, like, oh, that's not what it means, I promise. Right? That's ridiculous to me. That's
Mm.
stupid. But I don't invalidate what you're saying. I agree. I think anybody who is giving in to the temptations of Babylon or riding the beast is a whore. That's exactly what we're supposed to be, the 10 virgins, waiting with our our oil fast and our lamps lit for the bridegroom to come. It's a marriage parable. It's a marriage metaphor. Okay. It's not about me calling them a literal prostitute out on the street and doing nasty sexual things. That's the wrong imagery, right? I mean, it's the right imagery, but it's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it in the same sense of being unfaithful to God. And to me, it's just obvious. It fits in with all of Daniel's prophecies and last days. I mean, John's Revelation talks about the whore and everything and how there's going to be this conflict here at the end. So I get it, but to dismiss it, to me, you start to put everything into a box, and you don't see these bigger prophetic
Mm.
testimonies that are including this horror of Babylon, this horror of the church that's been corrupted, because it will have a role to play here in the last days.
And I'm not saying that. I just I feel like there's some myopia with that as well.
Oh, there
I'm
can be, for sure.
I'm not. I've learned not to be married to my ideas, because they can always change and I can be wrong. And um, but on that subject, yes, the Catholic Church has done many terrible things, and pretty much modern Westernism has been heavily influenced by it. There's nothing anybody can do. Um, and they still have their grummy hands in government pockets. And somehow, people that have watched documentaries on the terribleness of the things that they've done. But I don't want to make it a bashing session, but it's just very indicative of human nature. And it also became an avenue for people seeking power in a time when it was very hard, where people said you had to be born of a certain bloodline to be in charge, and they offered you don't need to be.
Right.
And so there's a lot of stuff into that. So I really like when the Catholic Church loses the Byzantine Empire, because the Pope decides that, I kind of like living in Turkey more. And oh, the Gauls raided, and oh no, there's two Catholic. Oh no, we have Roman Orthodoxy. There's a 5-minute video.
Better just stay here.
TikTok.
Constantinople. Yeah.
Nothing bad will happen to me. Not that the Islamic empire was gunning for Turkey, and eventually he ends up losing, and that was pretty interesting. But and then Spain, the Catholics lost Spain to the Muslims for Iberia, and a lot of people don't know that either, that there's a lot of history that just gets glanced over. And that's something that I've been really appreciative in studying Islam, is awakening my Western eyes to how much is just completely
whitewashed,
and winner takes all perspective. And that's not true.
Yeah.
My wife speaks Portuguese, and the other day she said a word, and I knew, and went and looked it up. And a lot of Portuguese and Spanish has Arabic origin words that they adopted. And so there's some influence that can't be undone. Like the first university in Europe was ran by a Muslim woman. So they don't like to talk about that though, because the Catholics are great. But getting back on track and kind of going into this direction of you're pretty much Twitter's foremost advocate of the electric universe theory, and we've kind of dabbled into it. It's an alternative to the standard cosmological model of modern Newtonian or Einsteinian physics, which, for those who don't know, again, history, if you go studying how this came about, everyone just happenstance and the things worked. And so thereby they must be proved right. And these things work. Einstein was right about E equals MC squared. So everything else you must be right about as well. And they just keep doing that. But there are individuals within those communities that are saying this is completely wrong. There's been no valid real discoveries since the 70s. And one of them was pointing to the fact that we have yet to obtain fusion reactors as a nuclear fusion. They said that we should have had this by now, and we haven't. And it's clear, it's indicative, and it's a chargeable offense that we failed. And then you ask them, well, what about this EU theory? And they're like, oh no, that's just flat Earth crap, and they immediately dismiss it. And I do want to touch on I like the idea that flat earthers did, and I entertained it a little myself. But it just, when you stand it up to actual observations, flat earth was disapproved, by a Greek philosopher in Egypt for measuring shadows. It doesn't stand. And when you look out in the universe, we see orbs everywhere, right? Why would we randomly just be this flat thing? And I've heard arguments that it's projection of the filaments to describe the firmament, that we don't see everything of God's throne or something like that nature. But I don't accept it. But the main dogma of the community is seeing flat earthers and seeing how they're being pseudoscientific, and they're trying to do these things. So anytime anybody comes along that they don't like or disagree, they immediately slap it on there. And if you go and read criticisms of the electric universe theory and plasma cosmology, it's associating with flat earthers. If you go to rationalwiki.org, it literally says pseudoscience community of people using science and doing this thing. And if you go and look at I've shared some of them with you as well, but debunking of the electric universe theory, they debunk the ideas at a base level where they don't even get into actual evidences and academic papers that have been published that show or test and experimentation, or they
Yeah.
make fun of the Sapphire project. And it's highly dismissive. But if you go and look at a lot of the major astronomy discoveries in the last decade, they're lining up more with it. I'm not fully accepting of it, but there's something to be said that when these guys who are supposedly crazy flat earthers are putting out papers, and a couple of years later, NASA orbs or experiments around the world are proving there's stuff to it. There's consideration. And the idea, if you could briefly explain what electric universe is, because we've downstranded it so far, we probably should have done that before, but anyway.
No, it's okay. But the electric universe, like you said, it's an alternative cosmological idea. But first, let me just say, like, for flat Earth, it was never a consideration for me. Okay, I'm somebody who's deep into the electric universe plasma cosmology. Flat Earth, to associate that with this kind of stuff is an insult. It really is, because what I'm talking about is over 100 years old. Joseph Smith was teaching these principles 200 years ago. Okay, in terms of electricity, the ether, and light being the major moving force in the cosmos. That's essentially what the electric universe is saying. Okay, at the most fundamental, basic level, electric universe is saying that electromagnetism, and I'm saying that broadly. If I say electromagnetism, just think I'm saying light. Okay, because that's essentially how broad it is. We don't have a clear definition of electromagnetism, just like we don't have a clear definition of gravity. If anybody who studied astrophysics knows this. Okay, I'm not lying when I say that we don't have a clear definition of what gravity is. In fact, there are so many mysteries around it. Newton himself, in his treatise on gravity, ended it saying that, hey, this is incomplete. Like, we don't know why it does these things, why the initial force pulls things together, or why there isn't a repulsive force that they've proved with gravity. Whereas with all the other forces, there's an attractive and a repulsive force. Gravity is the only one. So in the electric universe paradigm, it goes back to the fundamental of everything, even before Newton a bit, right? To say, Newton said in cosmos, meaning in the heavens, only gravity moves things and creates things and causes. So it's only gravity and collisions. And these big collisions and supernovas and explosions are what cause everything and produce the heavy elements that we see out there and all of that. What electric universe says is, no, it's not gravity. Gravity works, and we're not denying that gravity exists. We're saying gravity is literally dwarfed by the power of electromagnetism or light. And that light is actually what moves the planets and causes orbits and spins and rotations and all of these things. It is electromagnetism. It is electric currents in space moving through plasma that is ever present. So they say, standard model says space is empty. It's a vacuum. That's a lie. To an electric universe paradigm or a plasma cosmology paradigm, plasma is ever present. Plasma is actually the first state of matter. They don't teach you this in schools, and it's intentional, because their theories that they're trying to cram down as the standard model rely on solids as you understanding solids, liquids, and gases. Because what they call out in space, the big giant plasma clouds they see, it's just gas. It's just gas, guys. It's heated gas. That's plasma, but they don't want to admit that, because the moment you go into plasma, you admit that there are magnetic fields. And if you admit there are magnetic fields, you have to admit there is electric current, because you can't have a magnetic field without electric current. It's simple electromagnetics, right? Yet they want to say, oh, it's just gas. But now they're especially with the James Webb Telescope and Hubble and all these other things, seeing these deep space objects that are giant plasma filaments in structures. There's no way that an explosion or a supernova can cause and keep all of the plasma confined in a way that's isotropic or in unison, right? They can't do that. An explosion doesn't do that across the light years that we see these galaxies are. There's some other force. That's why they ultimately had to invent dark matter and dark energy and all these other imaginary things that they have not proved yet. 70 years, like you're saying, what are the new discoveries? They posited dark matter and dark energy, and not one thing has proved it. They have a lot of things that they claim, but they're, again, very disputed, and it's, again, a public balk. It's a fake. Just like them talking about gas and the solar wind. It's not wind, it's an electric current. And using climate terminology for the sun is disingenuous. They know it's not wind. They know it's an electric current because it accelerates away from the sun. Why, if gravity is the only thing working out in our solar system, why does the solar wind accelerate away from the sun? It doesn't make sense. Here's another one. If the sun is a giant nuclear explosion where the temperatures are 15 million degrees in the core, and there are X-rays being produced, right? An X-ray, I mean, we see them from deep, deep space. That's how energetic they are. But, there's this imaginary radiative zone in the sun that turns those X-rays into visible light. And that's what we see on the outside. So it's super 15 million degrees hot in the center, but then there's this imaginary zone. It's called the, what did I just say? I can't remember what it is, the reduction zone or something like that, where it says that, you'll have to look this up and trust me for sure. I'm not like, this is not my job. This is again, just something I'm aware of. So I'm not saying like I'm the expert on this, but to me, these are the things I ran into studying the sun, where they claim these things and they don't make sense. But in an alternative paradigm where the sun is not a nuclear explosion going off, and like look up sunspots. A sunspot is where the surface of the sun, the photosphere, is spread apart and you can see deeper into the sun. It's dark. It's darker than our thermal cameras pick up. That means it's cooler on the inside of the sun. How is that possible if there's 15 million degrees and X-rays coming out of the core of the sun? It doesn't make sense that the corona would be hotter than they find on the, during the inside these coronal holes. That's what's going on. There's some other mechanism at play. That's what they're discovering with the Parker Solar Probe and all these. This is the first time we sent a satellite to the sun. Are you kidding me? It's 2022. Give me a break. Like this is where I know that they're hiding it, because all of their existing energy structures and infrastructure for keeping people governed, they exist on a model that doesn't include this stuff. And so to start to tell people that these things are not as they seem, and that you could potentially draw energy from the air through different techniques, right? Well, then people are going to be free and not dependent on a government. And so this is not something that you want to give to the masses if you want to control them. So like, okay, I'm going into a lot of areas, but when I say this, think of this. We know that the secret combinations came into America and took over the central banking system in the early 1900s. From 1900 to the World War II, the secret combinations that Ezra Taft Benson pointed to, they were taking their strong grip on America in the early 1900s. Well, what else was going on at this time? Oh, it was
Science.
the solidification of Einsteinian and Newtonian science
Yep.
that negated ether, that ignored the plasma, because Christian Birkeland, who basically is the man that they call Birkeland currents after, and who described what the auroras are and our north and south poles, and described them as plasma and being connected to the sun, and the sun was plasma, right? Like he said all this stuff before Einstein, before all these people, and it just gets hidden. It just gets shoved away. And the same with Tesla and all the things that he said, because what he said corresponded with this idea of things are plasma and electricity is out in the space. And they just said, nope, that's why you don't learn about Tesla in school. You learn about Edison, because Edison, he commercialized electricity. He made a product. Tesla didn't. Tesla was wanting to give free energy away. Like me with my music, I see the same parallel. Okay, so as you study electric universe plasma cosmology concepts, keep this in mind, that the secret combination that was subverting our governments at the same time in this period are the same people funding the scientists that we hail as genius today. Okay, who funded Charles Darwin? But it was a certain company that was involved in a lot of slavery and all kinds of other things. You should look into it. Like why would they if certain companies like that were funding people and scientists today, it would be an issue, right?
Yeah.
Yet we ignore these things. Same with Einstein, same with Edison. It was the same JP Morgans and everybody else today ruining our lives and our economy and our government, that were propping these people up over people like Tesla, over people like Christian Birkeland, over people like Edwin Hubble's protege, Halton Arp, and over people like Velikovsky, who basically threw a stone and hit their Goliath and knocked him out, and they had to burn his books and cancel him. They sent Carl Sagan after him to discredit everything he said, yet Carl Sagan had to apologize because Velikovsky was vindicated in certain things that Carl Sagan explicitly came out against. So it's like, this is how it's always worked. It's nothing different. Today's the same. Their attack dogs are different. It's Bill Nye and Neil Tyson DeGrasse and Green and all these other guys that are out there on TV spinning string theory and lies to get you distracted from things that are already established and being tested and confirmed right now in plasma.
And what people don't know is there's always several factions within the current mainstream science. And in the early 1900s, while the downfall of America was basically being played with the introduction of the Federal Reserve and instilling the IRS and those facets. There was also a conference where basically the scientific community said, look, we have these two different avenues, and they all voted on it. They literally voted to focus their consensus of what should be accepted and let's reject it. And to accept and just to say that can't be wrong, that's where my interest in the EU theory comes from. I'm not 100% sold on it, and I'm not 100% sold on the mainstream body. What I am sold on is we've been wrong, and this is an opportunity where we can be wrong again. My mainstream physicist that I love is Stephen Wolfram, who is constantly being used in Hollywood's movies to explain science for them. And he's been on a lot of different podcasts. He's famously known for saying, if an alien race were to come here from outer space with advanced technologies, there's 100% chance that the science that they have is so unbelievable to us, we won't understand it, because
be
they could do
magic.
it
Yeah.
completely different. That would be magic.
Yeah.
And he recognizes that things can be done differently, and by happenstance our equations and certain things work. My background is more focused in other natural sciences and physical sciences. They work. I can design and build a plane, and it's going to go off the ground and fly and move around. The basics of it work. But when you start looking at an astronomical model, things start to get wonky, and that's when they've had to, obfuscate these things and keep advancing the things. I think the Big Bang Theory show on TV was the best joke. One of the characters lamented that he spent so much time studying string theory that, some paper with a lot of mathematics later disproves, and it's not the thing anymore. And it's hilarious how much faith these scientists have in these things because they're provable through mathematics. You're treating it as a religion. Your God is science. You're praying to the church of science. And so that's why I also see that modern science is also the whore of the earth in that regard, because they make fun of us for indoctrinating our kids, but you're just as indoctrinated. You just have just as much dogma. And heaven forbid somebody mention that you could be wrong.
Well, science is the priesthood. Okay. That's why there's that quote from Nibley. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was talking about a fracture earlier with the great apostasy, science is the priest class. It would have been the same class that Moses did battle with against Pharaoh and his sorcerers. They were called sorcerers, right? Mm-hmm. That is the same sorcerer class is how I see modern science. And I call it scientism. Like you're saying, it's a religion. It really is, because you can't separate these things, philosophy, religion, and science, and then pretend one of them has all the answers. And no, it's going to turn into the other two. You're going to have all of a sudden a philosophy you have to strictly live by, and religion and rights that you enforce. That's what they've become in their consensus standard model club. And like you said, it's disgusting. It's well, you didn't say it was disgusting. I say that, but it's a mess, and it's the result of an unsure foundation. And I think Joseph Smith restored that. And I believe, let me just throw this caveat for the electric universe, because I'm not saying you have to believe this, or how could you not? What I'm saying is, and I'm not saying that the Thunderbolts Project or anybody out there like Hannes Alfvén, he has his own cosmological plasma theory of cosmology. Like, I'm not saying any one of them or Velikovsky has it all right, but I'm saying they're pointing in the right direction. They're pointing in the direction Joseph Smith points. And that's why we should take it seriously. Because if we truly believe he's a prophet, why do we ignore this? And we want to force Gentile science and stuff, or we want to force our religion to bend the knee to those things, when all of a sudden these people are opening up this giant avenue for Latter-day Saints to say, hey, this is the right direction, because a prophet was basically saying these same things, that planets can move, or they can appear as a comet, right? And they can move their orbits, or the Earth actually changes in its orbits, or fire can come down from the sky between interacting planets. Joseph Smith taught these things. And it's ex-Mormon fodder for the ignorant, but for me, it's testimony building, and I think it's the only future that we're going to see. It's going to shake the testimony of Latter-day Saints who aren't open-minded and who are closed-minded to like accept the mainstream view of things and how it mates with our religion. I don't think that's necessary. In fact, I think what I found in being able to question everybody, even the Thunderbolts, like I don't think they have it all right, but they're the closest ones out there. They're the only ones that I can see that are taking the observations that we see and actually trying to make sense of it. Everybody else is hiding the observations or ignoring them or calling them something different.
There's a lot. And basically if you could summarize Electric Universe in a sentence, folks, basically the idea is that suns and galaxies are basically anodes and cathodes in electricity, if you're familiar with how it works, positives, negatives, and grounds, and that they're just the focal point of all this electric energy, and elements form around these energies. And if you look at some interesting things, it's quite hilarious. I'm really into artificial intelligence and neural networks and Internet of Things. And my capstone project was heavily influenced by that. And so I got a deep dive into it. And something I found absolutely hilarious was these astronomers wanted to use an AI program to give it the laws of physics that we know and to watch it create a universe. And plasma was basically the way it went. And the webs of how galaxies and stars and nebulae are all connected, it was basically it was almost the
Like a
same
neural
thing.
net, like your brain.
A neural net, like a
Yeah.
brain.
That's what the electric universe is saying, the stars
And
act. So like our body is connected to the earth somehow by
yes,
electromagnetism. That's what keeps us here with gravity, if it's an electromagnetic effect, right? And our earth is connected to the sun by these electrical filaments, these plasma filaments that feed our planet energy. In fact, these are the main proponents of climate change. And this is why they have this off the rails climate change push that's so propagandized and fake today, is they're trying to blame it on something they can tax from the people and from governments,
yeah.
when it really isn't in their control. But they're playing the apocalypto move, where they understand that things are changing with the sun. And so as these wild changes, the earth starts to wobble to and fro as conditions change here in the end times. They're looking to play off that and capitalize on our slavery, essentially.
I do.
That's a real another conversation.
Yeah, I do want to say I believe in human driven climate change that is highly measurable. We've destroyed entire ecosystems. Humans have slaughtered entire species of animals just because we could, and destroyed, like, the American buffalo were killed to impact the indigenous First Nation peoples, just so they wouldn't have food. Like, we literally went and killed out almost destroyed an entire species to extinction because we wanted to hurt these savage people, which is ironic in itself. But you can watch how cities are hotter on average than anything around. There are these giant heat sinks and temperatures are rising and stuff. And my issue is with pollution and the chemicals that we're putting out in the environment. Like, the Everglades are basically disappearing every year, and the ecosystems are being destroyed because we're there. There was a video recently of the deepest manned submarine in the ocean, and there's literally a freaking Walmart plastic bag basically floating on the bottom of the ocean. And so I see that we are directly related to that destruction of the climate in that aspect, in that regard.
I would agree. And
but,
I would say, look, the earth has had drastic climate change before because of the wickedness of the people. So I'm on board with that. But the carbon crap that they're pushing is a crock of crap.
That cows are the culprit, but meanwhile, the biggest polluters in the world are cruise lines that put out metric million tons. I want to say it's like almost 1 trillion tons of carbon. And then that's the thing that we haven't been able to. Our science, is amazing as it is, has not been able to answer the carbon question. Elon Musk has proposed that. Basically, I will give you a ton of money if you can demonstrate, pulling carbon out of the air. And so far, the only people that have been able to get anywhere close are people to go plant a tree. But it's interesting of how much magnetism is in nature. If you look at birds and fish and dolphins and whales, they all navigate in a 3-dimensional space based off of magnetism.
We do too. If your eardrum bursts or something, your equilibrium is off. That's a magnetic field that's in balance.
And inside there. And and that pseudoscientific study of people's auroras, that's literally our own magnetic fields being put off. So again, pseudoscience, big, huge, fat air quotes, but it's really interesting. And there's a lot of things that can be drawn. Have you seen that video on YouTube? It shows it starts with our sun, and it just continues to show these different stars that we found.
Oh, and how big they are. Yeah.
And how big and unimaginable they are. Yeah. Pearl of great price, folks. It's right there. Every star has a greater star to a greater star. And if you look at these modelings, even the AI modeling, the stars within that model of the AI universe, greater stars control the lesser stars. And you can look and see that with galaxies and how that works. So
it's fractal. It's fractal in nature. That's the appeal of it to me, is that You can go up and down scaling with electricity. It's the force to rule them all, because on the quantum scale and on the macro scale, it's the force. And so that's what's convinced me. And I equate, like I said, electromagnetism to light. And if we believe the science that Joseph Smith brought, that he restored in the Doctrine and Covenants and the Pearl of Great Price, those are my Bibles in terms of cosmology: Doctrine and Covenants and Pearl of Great Price, right? And those are the books that people don't study. We're condemned as a church because we don't take the Book of Mormon seriously. Or you think we're going to move on to the Doctrine and Covenants and Pearl of Great Price and be experts yet? No, as a group, we're behind. But I'm saying, as individual members, we have every ability to take these things seriously and learn that Joseph Smith taught. Light rules the universe. Light is the focus of everything. Light is what Jesus Christ is full of, and all the light comes from him. He powers it. So, like, with that paradigm in mind, this is it's like singing and dancing the same tune. Whereas everything else that's dark and separate and isolated, it makes no sense in a paradigm that Joseph Smith presents, that everything's connected. Bigger, smaller, one affects the other, down the chain, up the chain. That's why our interactions as humans are so important, because we're playing out the same thing as like a human lightning bolt across the generations. It's the same. And that's that's to me the beauty of it, and how easy it is to recognize culturally that they're all apostasies of the same idea, keeping electricity, planets, and electromagnetism at the forefront of heavenly interaction with the earth. That these things are true. Like Moroni leaving through a conduit, floating up through a giant hole that opens up, a portal that opens up, and he goes up a tube. That's what a conduit is. That's what electric universe plasma cosmology teaches, that all of these stars and galaxies and quasars and everything going up to big mega galactic clusters, they're all confined in plasma tubes in the center of them, where the elements combine through Markland convection. So the stars are like pearls on a string, the pearl of great price in space. And when we look out into deep space, that's what we see in these giant gaseous plasma filaments, is the creation of stars along strings.
Something that I've been kind of thinking on is dimensional being, and focusing on the exact nature of what God is, and compared to us, and the transfiguration that you see within the various scriptures that individuals have to go through, and to understand and how imperfect we are. I think that's due to the dimensional nature of God and what that position is to our nature. And so when we receive revelation, it's being given to us in a way that we can understand, but we are also inherently fallen in nature. And so there's aspects that we can really never understand, and we're always grasping, right? I'm not saying that God doesn't know how to give us exact message of like, do this now. I feel like that can happen, but when you're trying to, I don't know, it's kind of like an ant looking up at my foot as I'm about to step on it. It has no comprehension. It's just a shadowy day right now, right? And so I feel like a lot of that bigness that we have when we look at things, there's going to be unanswered questions, but we can do some diving and research and studying. And I feel like a big thing, I've seen a lot of people that leave the church is they have this bookshelf of ideas and questions that they've not been able to get an answer to. And eventually the shelf breaks and they end up leaving the church, and they just couldn't, did Adam have a belly button? Like, is that what you're really focused on? And they make these excuses as to why, and they have everything here. And then when you bring up something like, hey, look, maybe there are laws, natural laws that can be in play that are in tune with the scriptures. And if you look at all the lectures of faith was even an early foray into science, and Parley P. Pratt was he loved to postulate on physics and theories and stuff. And so if you look at a lot of the founding members of the church, and even into the, I would say the 70s, scientific inquisition, not inquisitiveness, not inquisition, but to you, that makes the two in alignment. And so that's what I've kind of enjoyed with looking at that as well, and putting at greater lost human history. I know you're not a fan of Graham Hancock, but I really like him. He's not a historian in any way, but he's basically researched enough stuff, and he's done it. He's earned a unofficial degree in history, and he's being vindicated, and stuff that's being found, that humans were all over the earth, that the current accepted spread of how humanity moved is also being debunked. So it's interesting that there's a lot of other aspects in science that are also being proved, like this can't be. And
I
I'm
like Graham
sure,
Hancock too.
yeah.
I just the where the difference is in terms of his philosophy and mine, because
Mhm.
I openly welcome the ideas he's presenting in general, in
Yeah.
terms of like society. We have declined in sophistication. It's not that we've evolved from a primitive form to
Mhm.
this technological brilliance that we have now. No, in fact, I think Adam
It's always
was
been that
way
way.
smarter, and it's been downhill. Yeah. So I agree with him there. And in terms of the megalithic structures as something else probably being involved in their construction, where we disagree is that he's presenting all of these still within a closed framework,
Yeah.
a framework of the standard model. So all he has is collisions. He doesn't have massive lightning strikes from space that could cause the same types of glacier melts and things that he likes to talk about, or like the flames of Sennacherib would have been a Birkeland current strike from a passing body, a Passover, right? So like he doesn't have these things in his tool belt, and so all he has are comets or ice ages that are arbitrary with dates that are still confined to radiocarbon dating and these standard model
Mhm.
assumptions that you must accept to play by their rules. But introducing again a foundation of plasma and electricity, not just in space but all over, and having in recent history a shakeup of our solar system, which again fits what Joseph Smith said, that the planets literally fell out of position, that they were together in a congregation once before and fell to this position. Brigham Young has quotes talking all about that the Earth fell into its current orbit and it will be
Mhm.
returned back to where it was. These are ideas that we should take seriously from people. And that's what Graham Hancock, he doesn't have those in his tool belt. So he's just using
No.
comets and collisions and things. So that's where me, I'm
Yeah.
like, he's like alternative theory light to me. He's like, I know he's aware of electric universe stuff and Velikovsky. He's aware of it, but he chooses to do the standard model because it's more profitable. That's my take on him. That it's more about money, and he's using these ideas for money. It's like David Icke. If you know David Icke and
Yeah.
conspiracies and that kind of stuff, they're the same. They're
Lizard
more
people.
showmen and they're more
Yeah.
showmen and entertainers than they are truth seekers.
Yeah. Um, I do like Graham Hancock's book. I need to finish his America Before, but it's just hilarious. I feel like there's a bit of godly humor in that humanity declares something and we find something that is completely opposite to what we declare.
Yeah.
Um, it I love how the original detractors of the church said that nobody ever wrote on gold plates. That's not a thing. And there's probably in the last 20 years been so many freaking findings. It was actually pretty commonplace. And it's just hilarious. And then
Yeah.
it was funny. And even in one of those metal books they found, there was a dude named Alma. Like,
That's right.
it's like, um, God's like, you're a bunch of idiots.
Well, this is
And
faith. This is really what it takes to, and I hate to say this, but if you've got a shelf that breaks because of ideas like
mhm,
this that are Babylonian in nature, your shelf was in the wrong dang room. You
yeah.
weren't building the shelf in the right house with the right foundation or anything, because your shelf should first consist of, well, this is what the scriptures say. And so
Mhm,
anything else I'm measuring has to some degree explain the scriptures, or the scriptures can explain what's going on. That's the approach I've taken. And this is where I've gotten nothing. And look, this is probably why ex-Mormons aren't out there actively challenging my electric universe testimonies of cosmism in the temples and things like that, because they don't understand it. It doesn't compute to them. They have no idea where to even start, because there isn't a website with anti-Mormon material to debunk this stuff yet. Trust me, I've looked.
you
There
know what
isn't.
you know what you should do? You should write it.
I know. I'll put it out there, and it'll just be a conversion story that they'll have to follow along to. It's like, okay, next step is you're going to go here, and that would be ingenious. But
uh,
I wonder that sometimes, like especially because I put myself out there with DesNat and all
poker
kinds of
hand
stuff.
troll. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they won't come touch it. My brother, who left the church and is very against the church, he even refuses to like battle me or to debate me about these things, mainly because I have answers, and if I don't, I can say, well, let me study, and I can come back and say, oh, look what I found, here's this, what do you have to say? And there isn't
Mhm.
there isn't an there isn't an atheist out there who's out there addressing these things. And so you can't go and run to find somebody to answer the question for you. You've got to think through it. And that's where people just dismiss me, or they're like, oh, I was talking about weird stuff.
Not to sidetrack, but as I was really questioning my faith, and I ended up on studying Islam and stuff, and I've found a lot of things that really stand out to me, and I started digging into it, and I started again at that metaphor of walking up to a beautiful painting. The closer you get, you see the imperfections. But
Yeah.
something on a larger view of both Mormonism and Islam is I find it how hilarious the ex-members of each are almost the same. Like
Radicals
it's
against it once they leave.
yeah.
Yeah.
And algorithms, saw me, Googling Islam. And so I get that on the thing. And I was watching this thing, this 3-minute rant about this thing. And at the end of it, I find out they're a Muslim. I thought they were Mormon the whole time. And I
Yeah.
was like, that is insane. And even the ex-Catholics and this vehemency. So it's like, uh, there's something to that. I find that that's absolutely hilarious that they all act, they act the same way, screeching and
To
cries
me,
and
it's an electromagnetic parallel,
reaction.
right? You have
Yeah.
this positive to negative where you're up way high and you're going to get whipped way down to the other side. You can't leave it alone.
So
Fall is great.
there's just so much that we don't know, and we're so juvenile in our understanding, and we're so ridiculous in our dogmas that we can't be wrong. And so we have to errantly walk down a path knowing that this wasn't the right way home.
Yeah.
And so that I feel like there's a lot of retrospect that we can do as a society. And I feel like that's what's holding us back is there's a lot of good answers out there. Also, one of my favorite papers I've come across was a peer reviewed, journal accepted, and critiqued article about surviving jumping out of a plane without a parachute. And it was a cross-sectional control study. And for those who don't know, is you have a group with a parachute and a group without, and they pushed them out of the plane to see who would survive. And at the very end of it, it said, if you made it this far, then this must be a joke. And the entire purpose of this paper was to see how much academics will actually read the paper beyond the abstract and read through the full pages. And so even right now, there's people trying to show like we need to wake up.
Yeah.
We need to take the hubris, put it on a bench, and see where we're right and where we're wrong. And something could come out in a couple of years that we could both be like, hey, EU is close, but it's not the cake.
Yeah. And I would happily accept it and jump into that and say, this is what the gospel is about. So
what was that? Oh, okay. Yeah, it's dear. Okay. Sorry, wife just woke up. Good news, we didn't wake her up at all. So
okay, good. Tell her I'm sorry to keep you so up early and occupied.
Oh no, she knows I do this, and she's supportive. And in fact, she suggested, hey, that guy you listen to, maybe you could have him on your podcast. So it's not just me doing this. Crap, I hate doing that. I was ranting about academia, but anyway, yeah, that paper is hilarious. The comments, one of them said, "This is beautiful. I'm giving it to all my first year students."
This is the test. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Let them know.
And then it's happened also, like those guys that made that Joe Rogan talks about it all the time just because it's so hilarious. These guys went and made these fake research papers that were just so bonkers, but were accepted.
Yeah.
Like they legitimately wrote these papers, and there's a lot of stuff that we can be improved on.
I work in higher education at the moment myself as an advisor for doctoral candidates. Okay, so PhD level, and let's just say that I ask myself every day, like, this is the future of academia and our world. We're in a load of trouble. You don't have to put that in there. I hope you cut that out, maybe.
Yeah, I'll cut this out. I'll have to listen to the whole thing to cut some stuff out. Like, I don't know if you heard my cat free rapping meow.
Yeah, I heard that a little bit, but it was okay. It wasn't too distracting. Crap.
I'll have to go back in there. Yeah, there's just so much stuff going on. We have no idea. And I think that's the limitation of our flesh, that we're naturally fallen. And I do have to say this. my study of Islam unironically has made me more increase my faith in the idea of this apostasy of true knowledge to fallen knowledge, because that religion is not, from an outside perspective, it seems like they have it together. They do not.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's the same with all religions. Heck, even in Buddhism, you have two splitting people that, worship Buddha as an actual god, and you have the people that realized Siddhartha Gautama was trying to figure out how to get back to God through nirvana. So like, there's even fractures of there. It's insane.
We're going to have fractures in the church too, even more than we have right now. We see them happening right now.
It's
yeah,
happening.
But I'm predicting there will be a great apostasy of our church in terms of a big breaking, falling away. 50% is what the parable of the bridegroom is. Yeah,
with the Heavenly Mother troops.
Yep.
And
this is the same apostasy that we see repeated in the Old Testament too, adopting the mother, Heavenly Mother worship, the star worship. It's the same. And as I predict, as these planets and these new sciences appear that people have not taken the time to look at, like this is why I'm trying to throw this warning. And you'll find this in my music, this message is, when the Antichrist comes, when the governments collapse, when the nations fall, that's what we're waiting for. That's the suspenseful moment here. This is the calm before the storm. This is why the stakes of the church were set up, because there's going to be a storm, and the stakes will be a refuge. They will be a protection for the saints of God and anybody not willing to fight their neighbor. So when this moment happens, and when these things come, there will be signs in the heavens and people who know about plasma and these types of sciences that are going to deceive the world, that they have magic, that they have all kinds of new technologies and crazy things. They will have them, it's true, but they will be dwarfed by what returns in God's favor, by the message God delivers through the return of the 10 tribes, the restoration of the lost tribes. That's a physical thing that will happen. That's going to happen at the same time that all these things break down. But people who have not put in their mind to think that these things will happen, and that there will be a little decision to make, a valley of decision, where Latter-day Saints will have to choose, do I follow the prophet right now into what seems like a scary wilderness, or do I follow the government and the governments of the world and the wisdom of the world? That is going to happen. When these things start to happen, if you've never thought about this before, it may seem
your faith is going to be shaken.
Yes, and it may seem the way to go with the governments and not with the crazy religions that seem to be doing the wrong thing.
Especially if you're a superficial member, or
yes,
you're a Hallmark member. I don't know if you've heard that term, but it's like basically like your family. You put on a show at church, and then when you're at home, you crack out, the alcohol, you're drinking, partying, doing all those terrible things. Like, and people are having their secrets, shouted from the rooftops. That prophecy is being fulfilled. Like that, the group of the members of the church that were having a swingers club that got busted on TikTok because an Exmo hacked their thing, and all that drama that came out from it. And not to go back on the Islam thing, but they actually have specific prophecies about the way Dajjal, which is the Antichrist, will operate. And it'll be very obvious in how he does it. And I think what's leading up to this is this whole abandoning faith.
Yeah.
Right now, one of the number growing religions is Wiccanism again. People are just so desensitized to actual religion, they're trying to find it elsewhere. And so when people have been told that there's no such thing as God and there's no power in these things, when you see somebody perform a miracle, you're going to believe them. And that's how Dajjal will operate and act. And that the warnings, basically, you got to be a pious Muslim to see that. And even the pious Muslims could be led away, because he's going to literally mimic the miracles of Christ, from water to wine and etc., raising people from the dead. And if you're not built on a firm foundation, you're going to be sucked up in that. And seeing how fast people are with culture right now, of being with what's the most current thing to do, people are being eaten up into it.
Yep.
So
yeah, 100%. I agree. And that's the point of my music. If it seems like it's, Leiland, you're too excited about stuff, or like, why are you pushing on this so hard? Why are you talking about secret combinations all the time? Why do you have that in your song? It's because I can clearly see what's on the horizon, whereas everybody else seems to have their head in the sand about the direction of geopolitics in the world, the direction of religion in general, the religiosity amongst people, and the revolutions I see happening in science. There's this great convergence happening where we are seeing a revolution or a turn. I know you're familiar with the fourth turning and all of these types of philosophical, posits about right now and in future. Now, couple that with the prophets. The prophets are clearly warning that we're at a hinge point. that we're at this great acceleration of the work. Prophet has said a number of times, the Lord is hastening his work. And if you look up that part in the scriptures, yeah, we can take it as a general sense and that the temple work is expanding and missionary work is growing and we're converting people, but it doesn't matter. That's not what it's about in my mind. The hastening of the work is the throwing a stick in the plans of the evil in this world, right? Throwing it for a loop so that they have to accelerate their plans, expose themselves, they go to war with each other, and it spills over into the world. Okay, this is the hastening, where the slow, methodical march to tyranny that we've been enduring for hundreds of years now, where they've been slowly just inculcating us, indoctrinating us, and pushing us along like sheep to be indebted to their financial systems, to be enslaved to their entertainment ways and ways of thought, and to accept their religion, their view on reality and purpose in life. It was a slow walk, but it has accelerated greatly within the last several years.
It's just the chain reaction is just unfathomable right now. I would say I was an early adopter of Bitcoin. I wish I bought more. That was one of the ones. I was a poor, broke, young military service member, so I had no money, but I got Bitcoin for some stuff I wanted to get. And I've just kind of held on to it and I've invested into it. And it's kind of hilarious that there's some people that are literally like, they think that's the mark of the beast and that it's this evil thing and that we shouldn't accept it. And then there's some people saying that like, this is what will free us from the mark of the beast. And we need to have this decentralization. And there's conspiracies within it now. It's just, it's hilarious. And something that I've noticed and have kind of commented before on this podcast and with others is the secret combination folks are having troubles keeping things under wrapped. And I feel like they did not plan for the internet. And for anybody that knows anything about the internet's been around for actually a long time, since the 1950s. And it wasn't until the 70s and 80s it actually came to fruition, but it's been around for a while. And the biggest thing that the secret combinations, if we say that this is true, and there is a secret organization of people, the biggest thing they messed up on was letting us get smartphones to record things. But at the same time, that's also how a lot of chaos is spreading. It just takes one person, and deep fakes are happening. And like there's
it's people like is it Harakiri? Is that where you cut yourself?
Yeah,
I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah.
So it seems like that's the move they're making. And it fits with prophecy in my mind, because this is their third beast system, their globalist system, that they're just going to throw to the wind. And the fourth beast, the latter day fourth beast iteration will stand up out of the broken parts. It's the Masonic, the Illuminati mantra of Ordo ab chao, or order out of chaos. Mm-hmm. That they've intentionally set this fake system up. They know it's going to run into the ground. The financials are going to collapse and everything, but they're okay with that because they've already got the replacement on deck. And it's the things they've probably been suppressing from us. I'm sure they know all about plasma technologies, and we're going to see UFOs flying around in this next war. I honestly think that that'll be the case.
And not to go off onto conspiracy theories, which as of 2022 is more like yesterday's theories, today's news. And how much people try to detract and say that they're anti-Semitic. And then there's that whole pyramid of how far are you to being an anti-Semitist? And it's like, okay, they're trying to, but again, a lot of these theories have grounds in reality of people doing secret combinations to work in their favor. And time again, how many times has it been proven that these things were happening? And it's just like, we just have to accept it as is. Like for those who don't know, if you wanted to summarize what World War I was three brothers decided that they would take their childhood dream of fighting each other with real armies and bring it to life. Three brothers decided, why not? Germany, France, and the UK were basically stepbrothers. And with World War II and the banking systems and stuff that's been seen there, and even modern, it's come out with like JFK was literally shot because he saw it.
He opposed these people. Yeah,
he opposed these people. He was shot.
I don't think he opposed them from the start. But I think once you get in that system and you see what's going on, that's when he became not an asset anymore. And I think that's the Donald Trump story as well. Not that he's the Antichrist or anything like that. He was an asset that kicked against the pricks. And I believe in the Ezra Ziegel prophecy, where it seems like everything's lining up. that prophecy even backs what we were talking about earlier in terms of the early subversion in the 1900s, and that prophecy stating that that's when this happened here in America. So like, to me, there are so many data points across scriptures, apocryphal or not, that confirm these types of things I talk about. That's why I have the confidence to talk about them. It's not that I am just making this up and trying to be Mr. Conspiracy Man or be the guy that connects the dots first. I'm not. I'm saying it is, if anybody wants to challenge me on these things, I know I've got an arsenal of scriptures and prophetic words that can support why I believe this. Most people believe in things that they don't have that support with. And that's my whole philosophy, is like, I won't believe in anything really, or put it out there publicly, unless I can support it by the words of the prophets or the scriptures.
And since
so I challenge anybody on my cosmology stuff. If you think that,
Yeah.
that I can't find something, a scripture or a words from the prophets that support what I'm saying, or you think I'm revealing something that I shouldn't, take me up on it. DM me. Let me know. Come at me. Nobody does, because it's not. These are obvious open source things that are built right into the plain symbolism of what we do. And I'm saying we can use it to our advantage or we can ignore it. And I'm saying we are missing out on everything, a lot, right? Not everything, but a lot in terms of our exaltation if we dismiss this stuff.
And for instance, like because you're so into it, in the music industry, plants was a huge conspiracy theory. That they're not doing that. Capitalistic greed says yes, they are. Basically, a music plant is somebody that industry fakes an up and coming music artist. What's his name? He dressed it up. He made the Satan shoes with blood.
Oh yeah, I can't remember. Little Red or Trippy Red? No, not Trippy Red. One of those.
One of those. But he was a plant.
Patsies.
He did the Country Road song, and everyone thought that this guy was just making music in his basement. But there's literal pictures of him hanging out with execs, and they knew it. They stood him up, and it's his plant, and it's widely accepted. And people are. It's like they just accept it, or like how people have been saying, the governments are going to start to force us to eat fake food, fake plants, and get us to eat bugs and to do our Soylent. There's literally a supplement company named Soylent. They saw the movie and book Soylent Green and said, that is a beautiful thing.
That's the future.
Emulate. That's the future. Let's do it. And it's like, oh my gosh, did you guys not pay attention? Like Fahrenheit 451? Like,
well, they're getting a bad reaction from people not eating the bugs right now. So what have they shifted to?
Absolutely.
Look at what they're doing now. They're feeding it to our livestock.
Yes.
They're starting to feed the bugs to our livestock. And the
animals are getting sick. They're not eating. There's an ecological system of everything going up to eventual levels and layers, and there's a role to it. And that's something I've been into, is the nutrition side of it. Now, caveat, I'm trying to lose weight. I got super depressed and gained a lot of weight, and so I'm losing it, but I'm doing these holistic, human appropriate diets, and it's working. I'm losing weight, right? The World Economic Forum introduced the idea that we need to reduce nitrogen to alleviate climate change, and Sri Lanka bought into that crap, and they decided we're going to cut nitrogen in a monocrop society and fertilizers. They cut it. Sri Lanka is currently writing. There's people smoking marijuana joints in their palace right now. The president's fearful for his life in Sri Lanka.
Did he flee? I thought he fled too.
He fled.
Yeah.
And right now, anybody who knows anything about the Dutch farmers are rioting against the Netherlands because they said, oh, we will accept the World Economic Forum and we're going to cut farming down. They literally want a global reset. People were so upset about the Georgia Guidestones being destroyed. It's hilarious. People feel like that's a good thing, and they just gobble up these things so fast that they're literally puppets to, Metallica was right. Master of puppets go crawling and running faster and faster, right? So
we're at the point in the scriptures that they talk about being swayed to and fro with every wind of doctrine. That you have people that claim to be awake, and to an extent they are, because they're starting to see that a lot of what they've been told is a lie, right? I wish those same people would take that same attitude towards what they've been taught about members of our church, right? Hey, if everything else everyone was telling you was false about things, and they didn't know what they were talking about, why can't you reconsider what you think about my faith? Maybe that's something I like to see with people that are woke. But they think they're woke, but they don't have a framework to build all this truth from. right? So it's easy to be persuaded by propaganda or opportunists who see that there's this need and this desire for people who are passionately looking for truth. Well, they'll package up anything that they can claim to be truth and sprinkle in some scriptures or some religiosity, or let's say some prayers together, right? And they're drawing in massive amounts of people and selling them propaganda. So these are the winds of doctrine, where you don't have authority figures that are doing that, right? I think that's important, why you and I and people like us probably need to have louder voices at this point to say what we believe and how we're filtering things. Not that we have all the answers, but to say, hey, I'm experiencing this too, guys, or I'm experiencing this too, guys. Here's how I'm dealing with it. To me, my music, my Twitter threads and rants, that's what that is. That's my intent, is like, I'm not out there trying to say like, listen to me and follow me, I'm going to start my own church about electricity. Like, that's not what it is. What it is, hey guys, I see that there's this massive trial of faith coming, and we need to deepen our roots of faith. So here's something about the Pearl of Great Price, the Doctrine and Covenants, are temples that you need to understand, because when this hits the fan, when these secret combinations are outed and these governments collapse and their secret oaths are made known, they're going to come for our temples because of the symbolism, because of what we have portrayed on there that has been co-opted by these evil factions.
Yeah.
And we will be persecuted wrongly because of it. And so I want members to know that these things are not evil, and that there's a faithful, awesome, amazing explanation for them if we would but give the opportunity to rest upon our hearts.
There's a lot to be said in that. And there's just even more in what's coming. You know, there's a meme that is shared in the military community all the time of a guy in a gas mask riding on the back. It's almost like Skyrim. And the guy says, I know you're scared right now, but it's going to get worse, a lot worse. And there is a lot of disaster porn and black pill involved in that. But we're seeing that we're seeing people buy up, like, right now, you know, people, literally Americans left to go fight and help defend Ukraine from Russia. But if they'd known, you know, Western media was saying that Ukraine is a problem. They have a literal army of neo-Nazis. Like, there was a film crew that was asking the people in Donbass, like, oh, are you glad to, you know, have been rescued from the Russians? They said, no, we were saved by the Russians because the freaking Nazis. And it was like, oh, cut, camera, go black. Hey, how's the weather over here?
Or they don't want to talk about the biological weapon labs that are all over Ukraine that are co-ops, or like joint Department of Justice or Department of American facilities, right? They're American facilities in conjunction with other governments, and they're cooking up things like this coronavirus, right? Even the Wuhan laboratory theory that was, you were banned off the internet for even mentioning. Well, guess what? That's credible, and in fact, that's what it looks like. That's where it came from. The
chief even said, you know, it probably is from a lab. Yeah, you know, so it was from a lab. Quit lying.
We're in advanced warfare, and nobody's admitting it. Nobody wants to, because that's scary, right? But we are experiencing warfare on a new level that has never been experienced in modern history. That's what this is.
I won't comment on this, just because my expertise and job and what I know. Artificial intelligence is the scariest thing. People are worried about nukes and chemical biological weapons. I'm worried about AI. And I feel like a lot of people watched Terminator and Battlestar Galactica and said that would be amazing if it was real, and they're going for it. I think that we're not going to be able to get AI to do what we want, and it's going to operate independently. But basically, hypersonic missiles are flying at several times the speed of sound, to where current defense systems aren't able to track it. We have no idea. China launched a vehicle and it went around and orbited the Earth 10 times. We had no clue until they told us.
Right. So they have missiles that can orbit at like low Earth orbit.
And Russia was even using a hypersonic missile in Ukraine. So well, there's only one way that you're going to get your outdated systems to track something moving at that speed, because we will not be able to comprehend and respond fast enough. And that's through an AI defense system. Skynet.
Right.
I really think that it's going to do its own thing. And there's people like, you know, Fedora wearing Blake Lemoine, you know, he was saying that, hey, this Lambda bot is real. And he's trying to raise awareness that Google is a bunch of evil bastards. And they fire their ethicist. It's hilarious. You hire this person to tell you how ethical you're being, and you don't like what they say, so you
You
fire
fire him.
them.
Yeah.
Isn't your motto "do no evil"? Because it seems like you're doing evil right now.
That's the Pharaoh who murders all the sorcerers who can't interpret his dream, right? That's the same
Yeah,
thing.
that's like hiring. That's like being bad at money and hiring a financial advisor and then firing them for telling him to stop spending money. Like he's doing his job. Like what are you
Yeah.
talking about? And I see it. It's just going to get worse, and um, I feel like that's going to be our creation. I feel like that is going to be something that's going to be huge into that. Uh, while people inherently find it evil in itself, and that there's a conspiracy theory that computers are all demonically possessed and that's how things are working. I don't think that's the case, but I think it's going to be its own thing, and it's going to get out of hand because that's the way, human stuff works. And we do stuff without knowing. Like when we set off the first nuclear bomb, the math says it's going to work. E equal MC squared. We should be able to split an atom. They didn't know if it would stop, if it would just be a continual chain reaction and the entire earth would be gone. They went and did it. And right now there's a nerd in a basement that is lonely and has created an AI girlfriend that's going to get out, and we have no idea. I think there's fully functional AI right now. We just don't know about it. But that's where I'm concerned. There's going to be wonders and miracles of that, and that's going to be interesting. We are living in very crazy times, and it's going to keep getting worse, and we need to have that spiritual foundation. So that's why I really appreciate your music and the stuff you keep doing. It's awesome. I look forward to your new projects you got going on. Anytime you respond in the Discord, I drop what I'm doing to see what you're up to. So it's
you.
great.
I should be more active in there.
But after we sign off here, because I think I need to get going and doing the things I need to do. But and you have an evening to get back to. I do want to chat with you offline afterwards. But is there any closing things you want to say?
Just get to the temple. I think that's our safest bet. That's our fire insurance, right? A tithing and temple, to be able to say that we're keeping our covenants with the Lord and seeking Him in His house. Like He's going to protect you. If you're constantly trying to find yourself in His house, there's no reason to be upset by what's coming, because He has promised, just as He's promised that the nations will collapse, just as He's promised that these calamities will happen, according to every word, every prophet, like Isaiah has spoken. And even when He came to the Nephites here in Americas, He said, look at Isaiah, everything he said will come to true. And He was talking and pointing to our day as well. That Book of Mormon is for us. If we take the temple seriously and follow the prophet through these hard times, it will be glorious. We will be invited to the bridegroom's party, and it won't be the doom and gloom and devastation that is going to capture the Gentile psyche. And I think it's already happening. You're starting to see the division within everyone, and it's just going to echo and reverberate throughout everybody until peace is literally taken from the earth, just as the songs that we sing and we know is going to happen. And so get to the temple. That's my plea, my hope. That's the impetus behind my music. And when I try to comment and things, is I want to point people to Jesus Christ in the temple.
That's a good place to close. We can find you on Twitter and in SoundCloud. I did put the links into the description, so I hope people listen to your songs. I highly recommend Bloodlust. That's a banger for sure. So
thank you. I got good things coming as well.
Yeah. We look forward to it, man. And I am pausing recording now.